and welcome to a very fun Vlogmas compilation video. So these were all filmed last year, last Christmas time, because I was part of a touring Christmas production, a bunch of circus artists and a couple singers, and we travel around a select number of cities and states in the US, and I made vlogs as I went, and a lot of you have already seen them and enjoyed them, and I thought I would just put them all together into one convenient package for, your viewing pleasure. So without further ado, let's jump right in and have some fun crafting on the road. I'm telling you, filming in these hotel rooms has been a bit of a challenge. Take a look at some of the fun and copious crafting supplies that I've brought with me to keep myself occupied. It would be like rummaging through the garbage, as I always do, taped together with gaff tape from the theater because that's the only thing I could find. So I was like, perfect, I know exactly what yarn to buy, I know exactly what needles to use, and I probably won't even have to swatch it. Hello friends, and welcome to day one of my 2023 Vlogmas series. And today is a very exciting day because you are joining me on opening night. We will be premiering our show today, which means that you will get to see some clips from our opening night. It also means that tomorrow morning, fairly early in the morning, we will all be loading ourselves and our luggage onto a bus and doing our very first travel to the first city, the first non-rehearsal city of the tour. So I thought, let's open this vlog with me packing all of the crafting supplies that I am going to be bringing with me in order to keep myself busy on some very long travel days. So I've got quite the pile of crafting supplies back here, and I was like, let's just go through it all. Y'all can see what I'm bringing with me, some of the things I'm going to be working on in the coming 6 weeks, and we'll just start it off on a bit of a crafty note. Then later we can hop on over to some fun circus related content for opening night, and maybe we'll finish the vlog off with the first of our vintage patterns that I've brought with me. So let's take a look at what all's in this pile here. Okay, we've got a bit of a funny angle going on down here, but I'm telling you, filming in these hotel rooms has been a bit of a challenge. So we're just gonna sit on the side of the bed and look at the immense supply of Christmas crafting things I have brought with me. So if you watched my last video, then you saw I have a bunch of knitting things, a bunch of wool that I purchased. So I have brought some of that with me here. I have several skeins of that we'll be going through, but that's not actually my first knitting project. The first one I have is going to be using these guys right here. And it's going to be using this pattern as well. There is a reason for that. It is that I bought these way before I bought the mystery yarn bundle, and I bought them because it was going to be a super easy knitting project, and that is very much what I'm kind of in the mood for right now. I found the pattern on Instagram from this account right here, and I messaged her. She not only sold me the pattern, but she also told me exactly what yarn she used and what size needles. And it's a very flexible pattern because it's all knit in this ribbed knit. There's a lot more flexibility in the sizing than maybe some of the other vintage patterns. So the sizing that she knitted in should fit me. So I was like, perfect, I know exactly what yarn to buy, I know exactly what needles to use, and I probably won't even have to swatch it. So think that I'm just going to use that as like a quick, easy way to ease myself into the first knitting project for the season. So that's what's coming with me, and probably one of the first things I'll be knitting. One of the first things I'll be sewing are, of course, all of my knitting bags. So I did not have time to really get them sewn together. Well, all I managed to do before the tour was I cut out the circular bottoms using a bowl because I wasn't sure what the bowl supply on tour would look like if I would find something of the good size. So I've got the bottoms cut out, and then I will be probably starting to sew this together, maybe even on the bus tomorrow. I'm Not entirely sure, but I would love to get the knitting bag together because I have been using my crazy quilted bag for pretty much everything on tour. It's been hauling all of my training stuff between the hotel and the theater, but also I'm kind of like, now that I'm gonna start crafting, it would be kind of nice to have a crafting bag or two. So gonna be making these up, probably gonna make both of them up because I love both of them. And as many of you said in the comments, you can never have too many crafting bags. Then I'm not sure if I'm gonna use this, but I have this fun green gingham in case I wanna do some chicken scratch, which I found a couple examples at a antique shop by my house recently and absolutely thought it was super cute. A really fun way to make a vintage style apron, and also kind of exactly the right level of complicated or not complicated things that I want to be sewing on tour. Like, this is going to be fairly straightforward and fairly easy to make. So that's why I have the gingham. Then I was thinking about it. Everyone loved the crazy quilt video so much and I enjoyed it, and it was the perfect portable project. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just gonna do some Christmas crazy quilting too. So I have decided, I think I'm gonna try and do some stockings. So I have some fabrics that I brought with me from the thrift store, but I've also been kind of acquiring Christmas colored fabrics around here. So I started out, I got just some plain muslin for the sort of backing of the crazy quilt. And then I also have like this bundle of Christmas color themed fabric. And then I have some scraps from the show, which is very fun. Like, every time the costume department would just like trim something off, I would be like rummaging through the garbage, as I always do. So I've got some super fun green sparkles, sequins, and then some red velvet. Felt like I had one other option in here, but for now I've just got some really bright Christmas scraps from the show, which is going to be a very fun memory to include in this crazy quilt. Oh, and then I got one green rickrack. And then the rest of the fabric in here is thrifted because originally I was thinking, oh, maybe I can do some sort of garment on tour. Now that I've already made one garment on tour, I'm not in a big rush to make another one because it was not the most enjoyable experience, especially because I'm trying to film it and it's so hard to film large projects in these tiny spaces with bad lighting. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe no garments. In terms of thrifted fabric that was maybe originally going to be like a Christmas kirtle or a Christmas skirt, I got this really fun, it is supposed to be a tablecloth. Very fun Christmas tartan, kind of sparkly, very synthetic. I don't care, it's fun and bright and I love it. Then another Christmas tablecloth, this time in a little bit more muted tones. This one was the original one that I had grabbed thinking that I would try it out for a garment. So I have some clips of me in Goodwill like testing the drape and everything. So if I use a little bit of it for some Christmas stockings, I should still have enough to make a Christmas skirt maybe the next year. Then there was this fun, like maybe fat quarter-ish size piece of quilting cotton with these chubby little gingerbread that look so delectable and cute, and I love them. And also good to have greens because I have kind of a big lack of greens so far in my fabric stash. Then just some red linens, which were a good color, and I grabbed them also because I loved the edge here. And then the last thing that I have is a couple placemats that are this very fun sparkly gold, and they've got some nice embroidery on there. And I was originally thinking, oh, those could be some fun accents on my skirt, but now they can be some fun accents on my crazy Christmas quilt stocking. I do have a various handful of notions with me that I brought. So a handful of, you know, just mostly red and green embroidery floss, as well as some regular thread, and then a ton of knitting related supplies because, you know, if I'm making a knitting bag, I want to make sure that it can like fit most of my knitting stuff. So I brought kind of all of my knitting stuff with me here, as well as this little guy. I'm probably not going to use this all, but it is just to make sure that my knitting bag can, like, you know, that I'm thinking of what all I need to put in it. So those are the plans, like long term for the whole contract, but there is one plan that I have specifically for right now, today. One of the things I want to make sure I do before I leave this hotel here is to go find a stocking pattern and print it off, because I noticed that this hotel has a free printer, which I'm not sure if all the hotels on our tour are going to have one. So I'm going to go downstairs and just Google a stocking pattern that looks good, and that way I can kind of get started on setting up some of the scraps for my crazy quilt stocking project. So let's go get that printed off. Okay, here it is, all printed off, cut out, and taped together with gaff tape from the theater because that's the only thing I could find. So it's okay. I will say that this size right here, this is 75% of the original pattern. I did print it out at 100% the first time and it was huge. So if you want to follow along and use the same pattern that I'm using, which is linked down below, just be aware that you might not want to do 100% scale, or if you do, you're gonna have a giant stocking, which is fine. Giant can be fun, just like for me, this is my ideal size. So this is all printed off and ready to go. However, they did change our call time. It is opening day. It's a little bit chaotic around here, so I'm not gonna have time to get started on like laying out the fabrics, but at least now it's printed off. So if the future hotels down the road don't have a printer, I'm not stuck trying to freehand a stocking because my freehanded drawing skills are lacking. And for those of you who are dying of curiosity to know which colors I decided to bring from the mystery bundle, I kind of grabbed at random, but I have the 2 walnuts, the 1 burgundy red wine, 2 West Point blues, the 1 lavender skein, and 2 of the darker purples. So I don't actually know, but I kind of figured this might give me some options. I don't have to use them. I can wait till I have a better game plan, or I can just make up a game plan with what I have on hand. We'll see, but now you know which colors I have with me. Just moving over here and finishing packing up the large suitcase, and that reminded me that one of the things I'm super excited about is that once we hit the road, I've decided it's gonna be acceptable to break out the Christmas decorations. This is something that I've always done because we have always traditionally been traveling and working and not home for Christmas. Sometimes in countries that don't even either celebrate Christmas, or here like in Florida, it's a warm Christmas, which just, it feels so unnatural to me. So it's always been a tradition for me, who comes from a family that celebrates Christmas very secularly but very heavily. We love Christmas over in my household, and I do too. So I've always traveled with some form of Christmas decoration to set up in the hotel rooms, just to kind of make it feel a little bit more cozy, a little bit more homey. So in this case, I found some garland at Goodwill, and I have some twinkle lights in my bag as well, and we're gonna set up a little cozy fireplace on my iPad. It's gonna be like a whole thing, and I can just quickly wrap it up and throw it in the suitcase and bring it with me, but that way it just kind of makes it feel a little bit more like home for the holidays. So I am quite looking forward to that. So I'm gonna head into the theater, and next thing you'll see is probably some clips of our opening night. So opening night was a great success. Everything went really well, really smoothly. The audience was a lovely audience, so kind and energetic, and it's always so nice to have people in the house giving you that energy, especially after, you know, almost 2 weeks of rehearsals where you're basically trying to give full energy, but there's nobody in the house to sort of build that energy off of. So it was super, super nice, really fun premiere. Everybody enjoyed it and everything went really well and really safely, which we love. And then we had a very short premiere party. We got some fun branded merch, which, you know, this will probably come in handy on tour later down the road. And now everything is torn down and loaded in the trucks, packed up and ready to go to the next city. The crew is going to do that tonight on a sleeper bus so that they can get there really early and set up in the morning. Then we are going to be heading down there on the bus tomorrow morning so that when we arrive, everything is all set up and ready to go and we can do our sound check, our lighting check, you know, all of the validations and such. So that's the game plan for tomorrow. But for right now, I'm going to wash my face and get some dinner and go to bed because I have to be on a bus early tomorrow morning. But before I do all that, there is one thing that I do not want to neglect. So one of the things I knew from the very start was that throughout this whole Vlogmas series, I wanted to walk you through some of my favorite vintage sewing patterns, hitting 1 or 2 every day. And yes, that does in fact mean that I brought my favorite sewing patterns with me here in my luggage. Fortunately, they're all pretty small and very lightweight, but also knowing the somewhat chaotic and often exhausting nature of the rehearsal process, I did film a couple of them ahead of time. So for this very first vintage sewing pattern of the day, I'm gonna throw you to Shannon from the past. So today I thought we could look at a fun collection of patterns that I got off of Facebook Marketplace in Montreal. And there are some really good ones and then there are a couple other a little bit goofy ones. But let's start with my absolute favorite. In fact, it's one of my favorites of my entire collection, even though I haven't made it up yet, and that is this amazing packet of vests or waistcoats. And this is from Simplicity. Now, I'm not sure what year it's from. The envelope, as you can see, is actually quite damaged. So the part where there's supposed to be a year is no longer existent, but I will try to do some digging around, and if I can find the year, I'll throw it up here for you so you can see it. And like I said, I haven't made this one up yet, but I did poll my coffee supporters a long ways back to ask which one they thought I should make first, and fortunately, their #1 choice was also my #1 choice, which is also #1 on here. It's this one, and very happy that they chose that one because that's such a fun, unique sort of crossover line. You don't see that very often. So that will be the first one that I make when I do get around to making it. And hopefully I will in fact be able to make it because it does look like the pattern pieces are there. They are definitely there. I just don't know if they're all there, but hopefully they are. I can tell somebody has already made this pattern once because some of them are actually already cut out, like that little guy, all pinked out around the edges. So somebody's clearly already made it. Hopefully they were thoughtful enough to put all the pieces back. Now this is for a bust 30, so I will need to do some sizing up on it. But other than that, the pieces look like they're intact. The instructions are all here, so that's always a good sign. So this is definitely pretty high on my list of patterns that I would like to make up. Then next up, we have another pattern. This one's a McCall's pattern from the 40s as well. The year on the envelope actually says 1943, and it's this super cute peasant blouse pattern. So you've got some long sleeves here, you've got some super cute short sleeves. It's got that classic sort of, is that called a boat neck? Love it. Super adorable. I have some great fabrics in my stash that have this like lovely drape. Some of you, those of you who got fabric bundles for me, will also have some great drapey fabrics. Perfect for exactly this type of blouse. Now, I have not actually opened this envelope up yet, so don't know what to expect. The envelope itself is in better shape than the first one. And then opening this up, ooh, not only are they all there, but they look like they're basically uncut. So this one is a bust 36, which is fun because it means I won't have to size it up. If anything, I would have to size it down, but I actually kind of prefer roomier shirts. So this one, equally cute pattern. And then the next two that I got in this same bundle, it's kind of funny, they really don't go at all with the first two. So the third one that we have is this fun little pattern. Now, is there a year? I don't see a year on here, but just guessing by the style and the price, which is 25 cents or 30 cents if you're in Canada. I'm guessing it's probably somewhere in the 50s. And it is, like, it's still pretty cute. It's just not nearly as cute as the other ones. It's this kind of utility apron. They're calling it a cobbler's apron and or a poncho. And this one is likewise entirely complete. Everything looks like it's here. We've got the instructions with, again, the very fun artwork from the cover, this time just in black and white. And they have some kind of fun instructions in here, so like how to mark with tailor's tacks, how to mark with a tracing wheel and tracing paper, instructions for following the cutting layout. So kind of like nice, fun, comprehensive looking instructions. It'll be kind of fun to compare them to more modern instructions, which I feel are often lacking if you didn't infer that already. And then the pattern itself looks like it hasn't been touched. It looks very complete. It is only one piece of paper, so hopefully all the various pattern pieces are in this one little bundle, but it is a fairly thick bundle, so I am hopeful. That's pattern number 3. Then pattern number 4. What? Like, what the heck? This one is definitely one of these things is not like the other. So we've got another McCall's here. Carefree Patterns from McCall's. Copyright, take a guess, 1975. This does not necessarily scream 70s. Oh, actually, okay, no, looking at her hairstyle, there we go. That does kind of scream 70s. So I am not necessarily planning on making this one, but it kind of came in the package, so I'll hang on to it. And I do kind of think it's funny it has my dog's name there. Cinnamon. So those are all the patterns that I got from that bundle on Marketplace. Will I be making all of them? No, probably not, but a couple of them are definitely very high priority. Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick look at the first of the vintage patterns. Thank you so much for joining me on this first video of Vlogmas 2023. If you have any questions about anything that you saw, circus, costuming, crafting, all that good stuff, leave them down below in the comments and I will try to get to them in future videos, of which there hopefully will be several in a short span of time. So join me tomorrow for some on the bus crafting. Hopefully that'll be kind of fun. Maybe I'll get started with some knitting and then just setting up in a new city, all that good stuff. So thank you so much for sticking with me thus far, and I hope your holidays are going very smooth so far. If you've already started on the holiday preparations, I hope those are going well. And if you haven't, I hope you enjoy the calm before the storm. Thank you so much for watching and joining me, and I'll catch you in my next video tomorrow. Bye! I do not need 50 feet of garland. Oh my god. This is not how I expected this to go. Oh, and it somehow seems to have tied itself into a knot. It's holiday chaos, the cheerful kind. Hello friends, and welcome back to day 2 of Vlogmas 2023. If you missed the previous episode, we spent some time looking at all the various crafting supplies and projects I'll be bringing on tour with me, as well as had a sneak peek at opening night of our show, and we packed up for day 1 on tour. Now I'm on day 4 of the tour, and I am about to get into my whole traveling Christmas decoration setup that we talked about in the first video. But first, what happened in the middle there? Where did days 2 and 3 go? Well, that first travel day was pretty short. It was only 3 hours long, and most of it was spent finishing the edit on my costuming crisis video. The turnaround between these two cities was really tight, so when we arrived in Jacksonville, the rest of the day was spent in the theater. We unloaded our equipment, did lighting checks, sound checks, walked through the blocking to make sure that everybody was okay with their traffic on stage in this new theater where the dimensions were obviously slightly different than the theater where we had been rehearsing for the previous almost 2 weeks. Then, before we knew it, it was showtime. Then it was goodbye to Jacksonville and we were on our way to St. Petersburg, which is where I am right now. And now I finally have enough time to start setting up the Christmas decorations that I mentioned in the first video. So that is exactly what we're gonna be doing. I have my garland here. I have some thrifted random miscellaneous decorations, and now I just need to go dig in, find my twinkle lights, and we'll start setting this all up. Well, I found the lights, but it did occur to me that I probably should test them out and make sure they're working before I spend several minutes like using them and intertwining them with that garland. So let's just plug these in, do a little test, make sure they're working. Looking good. Okay, so I think I've got everything that I need here. I've got the garland, I've got the twinkle lights, I have the miscellaneous sparkly accents, and I also grabbed my sewing kit here because it has a pair of small scissors in it, and also it has a little bit of thread, so that way if I need to tie some of these accents in here, I can, because the goal is that I make something that is pretty bomb-proof in terms of I want to be able to just like grab it, ball it up, throw it in a bag, put the bag in my luggage, go to the next city, and then at the next city, just pull it out of the bag and set it somewhere. Like 15-second setup is what I'm going for because we don't have so much time on tour and we're often only spending a day or two in every hotel. So if I have to like spend 10 minutes setting this up every city or like repairing it constantly, I'm not gonna enjoy that and I might not use it. So we're gonna spend the time now to make it bulletproof and then just enjoy it for the rest of the contract. Not entirely sure where this opens, so let's, is that an end? That is definitely not an end. How long is this? 50 feet, okay, so 15 meters, that means this is more than enough garland to cover our sleigh pole 3 times over, like up, down, and up again. I do not need 50 feet of garland, so I will probably be kind of like doubling this up, making it one shorter but much thicker garland, a little bit more voluptuous. Okay, I had not fully anticipated the length of this, so I think I'm gonna quadruple it. I don't know, but it's gonna take, we're gonna need to relocate for this. Hold on. I still have no idea where the other end of this is. This very distinctly reminds me of every year when we pull out the Christmas lights from the previous year, and I swear no matter how hard we try to pack them away carefully, and we do, we really do, we like coil them up nicely and put newspaper in between every layer of every string. It's still chaos trying to get them out and on the tree. It's holiday chaos, the cheerful kind. Oh, and it somehow seems to have tied itself into a knot. Oh my god. This is not how I expected this to go. We have a halfway point. Now we're gonna double it again. Nope. So theoretically, this should be 12.5 feet long. Which is still maybe too long. I don't know. Let's test it on this hotel room mantle, because they actually kind of have a mantle here. So let's see how it goes on there. Well, this is by far the longest mantle desktop setup thing I've seen in a hotel in ever, and we still have way too much garland. So I think I'm just gonna have to cut it in half It's not that I don't want the extra festivity, but it's also like I need this to be manageable. I want it to be fairly simple and straightforward. And also, I don't have a ton of these little embellishments. Like I have some, but I don't know that I have 12.5 feet worth. So I'm thinking maybe just cut this in half. Hopefully that'll be a bit more manageable. That is much better. So now I think I'm gonna braid these together, but I think I'm also gonna try and just braid the twinkle lights in there. So I'm gonna see how many times that length of twinkle lights divides up into this. Ooh, is it gonna go in there 4 times? Like just evenly? Wow. So I've got the garland all separated into 3 pieces, and the goal is gonna be just to now braid the lights and the garland together. I'm gonna see. I'm not sure how well it's gonna work because one of these strands of lights has a loop at the bottom, so it might not work at all, but we're just gonna give it a try. I'm just giggling at the pure ridiculousness of the fact that this table has a handle in it, which works perfectly for supporting the garland. I'm gonna take that as a sign that it's meant to be, that this is gonna go well. So here we go, let's braid. Oh my god, it looks so good. I'm so happy with how that worked. I am gonna go do one last light check. I did leave myself a fair amount of cable here. Make sure that the lights are still working, because if they're not coming out of here. And then assuming that the lights are working, gonna go ahead and start embellishing it. Oh, it looks so good. Okay, embellishment time. Well, the gold accents are going in. They went in just lovely. They were fairly easy to weave in, but the red ones are proving a little bit more difficult because they're more fragile. You can see they're made out of styrofoam. So if you're a little bit too rough with them, you end up shredding the berries. So I think I'm just gonna wedge them in and then either see if there's some hot glue at the theater I can use tonight, or I'll just sew them in with some thread, which is maybe a little bit more effort than I was hoping to go to, but for now we're just going to gently weave them in as much as possible and then lay this out on the mantle and surprise Phil when he gets back from the beach. The beach in December. So weird. All right, well, I'm calling that done for now, unless I can get my hands on a hot glue gun and secure those red berries a little bit more, but it's looking very festive. I'm very pleased with how it's turning out. I did make an absolute disaster of my bed. There is gold glitter and bits of garland all over the place, but now I think I'm going to get this set up on the mantle here and then pull out my iPad and see if we can get a little fireplace going. Oh, it's so cozy. I love it. I love it. Okay, so the fireplace. What is the game plan for the fireplace? This is the game plan for the fireplace. This is an absolutely ancient iPad that no longer gets used and basically is going to be set up as a dedicated fireplace with the 10-hour fireplace on YouTube that I used for my recycled fireplace a couple years ago. That thing was amazing. We used it all the time. I kid you not. It sounds so silly, but we legitimately use that fireplace all the time. So I'm going to use the same video on this iPad and just set it up going. It won't have all the fancy decor around the outside because that contraption, while it was cool, also weighed a ton and was giant. So gonna do a little bit of Googling and download that video onto here and then see if we can get a roaring fireplace for the middle of Florida. Well, I think I got that to work. It is still downloading right now because it is quite a large file. So we're gonna wait and save the reveal tonight, which is fine because then we're gonna have the full ambiance effect when it's a little bit darker out with those twinkle lights. And I basically am perfectly on time to go grab some lunch and then head over to the theater for another load in, sound check, all that good stuff, and then a show tonight. So let's get going. Look.
Ooh. Oh, Christmas!
Just working on getting the fireplace set up.
Nice.
How was the beach?
We ended up going jet ski.
This theater was by far the coolest we've been to yet. In addition to the arcade games backstage, we also had our own private and spacious dressing room, complete with mini fridge, bathroom, armchairs, and a full-sized couch. So here it is in its finished form for the moment, at least. Although, as you can probably tell, it did get upgraded to the bedside table because I noticed that our lamp actually has a plug in the base of it. So this way, it's not only cozy holiday cheer, but it's also very cute ambient nightlight before bed. And then I can just reach over and like pull it out right before I go to sleep. So that's fantastic. I'm just super happy with how it turned out. I'm really glad that I did it. It just adds that little touch of holiday cheer into all of the hotel rooms that will be in on tour. As for the fireplace, it's a fantastic touch. I'm very happy with it in general. However, it is, I don't know if you can tell on the screen, but it's very low quality. It's like 480p maybe. So we're gonna upgrade that situation once the internet connection's a little bit better, but for now, again, just adding that little bit of cozy cheer into here. And now, since this is basically taking the place of my Christmas tree this year, I need to ask the burning question that is on my mind, and that is, are you a colored Christmas lights person or are you a white Christmas lights person? This is the hot debate. People come down very hard on either side, and I want to know which one you are. I will tell you my story with Christmas lights. I grew up with a multicolored Christmas tree. We had the classic multicolored strings that would go on the Christmas tree, you know, carefully coiled every year, like I said. And that was one option. And then we also had the option to switch all the lights off except for blue. So we would string several blue strings on one plug and then the multicolors on the other plug, and that was just because it had special significance to my father, hearkening back to some childhood Christmas memories for him. So that was kind of a unique option. I don't know anyone else that had the option to have an all blue Christmas tree. So that was what I had as a child, but now growing up, especially because I spent a lot of my Christmases in Europe, I personally, when I decorate my tree, I do it with all whites now. So I still love the multicolored Christmas tree. I love our family Christmas tree, but when I do it at home in our apartment, it's always white. And then I add in the touches of color and character and personality with the hodgepodge of Christmas ornaments that I absolutely insist on collecting, usually on my travels, whatever city I'm in that year for Christmas. I have ornaments from China and from all over Germany and Switzerland and just so many countries. So it's kind of fun to have a little collection of memories there. So be sure to let me know which camp you fall into, if you're camp colored lights or if you're camp white lights, because that can be quite a hot debate. So I hope you had fun. If you're crafting along with me, be sure to let me know what it is that you're working on. If you're cleaning today, doing some holiday prep, let me know if you got that accomplished, because not just a cute face on the internet, I can also be your accountability buddy. Like last time, if you have questions for me about these videos, about the circus or the crafting or the show, be sure to let me know down below. I will get around to answering them. I promise. It's just that there's a little bit of a delay between filming these videos and releasing them, and need a little bit of time to compile a list of a few interesting questions before I start answering them. But I absolutely will get to it. I will also be doing more crafting. I got started on some knitting, cast on a project today. Very excited about it, and so far it's going very well. So that will be next Vlogmas. So thank you so much for joining me. Great timing, the plumbing just kicked on in the neighboring room. So I'm gonna wash off my face, go to bed, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye! Ooh, ow, pins and needles. Pins and needles. Ouch! Okay, time to actually go do some laundry, because I realized that's something I gotta do before bed. Bye! Alright, well, it's story time, because that was by far the weirdest interaction I have ever had with hotel personnel in all of my years of traveling and staying in hotels. It was super bizarre, so buckle up. Hello friends, welcome to day 3 of Vlogmas 2023. If you've missed the first 2 installments, they're going to be linked in a little playlist right up there. But we are now day 3, and we have found ourselves in West Palm Beach after a rather uneventful, rainy, gloomy transport day. But now it is quite sunny and beautiful, and originally the game plan for today, because we do have the rest of the day off, was going to be getting a head start on basting all the pieces down for my Christmas stocking, which I am going to be crazy quilting. Again, I did talk about this in the previous episode, so check those out. But having arrived here and seen the situation, first of all, our hotel room has absolutely garbage lighting, and second of all, if we look out the window here, we can see that there is an absolutely lovely little plaza area down there with some very comfy looking couches. So I think there's going to be a change of plan. I think instead I'm going to grab all of my knitting supplies and go down and maybe get a start on some sweater knitting. What do we think about that? Let's go. Now, this is my first knitting project of the season, so I admit to being really rusty on everything, basically, but particularly the casting on situation, because this sweater specifically is a really stretchy knit. Refresher, here's the pattern here. It's basically entirely in ribbed knit, so I'm thinking I might want to use a different cast on, like one that's a little bit stretchier than the classic one, but I'm not entirely sure. I'll get back to you on that. I did message the seller of the pattern to ask what she used, and she did say she just used a regular cast on, so I don't know. Gonna do a little bit of a research, good old YouTube University, and see what I come up with, and I'll get back to you. So, upon review, I think I'm just going to go with the good old long tail cast on. That seems to be kind of a happy medium. It's stretchier than a normal cast on, but it's not the stretchiest of all the options, and it doesn't seem to be particularly fiddly, and I'm pretty sure I've done it once before. I think that's what I actually did for my V-necked vest. So that's what I'm gonna go for. That's what I'm gonna be doing. Hopefully it goes well. As I said, I haven't knit in a while, so there's a chance that I'm going to have some tension issues right from the start, but I hope not. Also, who decided to give me long, sharp, pointy objects to wave around as I speak? Speaking of which, man, I got so many comments on my Victorian patchwork video of people complaining about how much I use my hands when I speak, which, first of all, it's just who I am. If you don't like it, click off. Like, it's that simple. Just click off the video. You don't need to leave a nasty comment. But second of all, do Do people not gesture as they talk? Is it that strange? I just imagine these commenters surrounded in their lives by people wearing straitjackets and with absolutely no passion or emotion for anything that they do in their daily lives, which is just sad. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Let's get knitting. All ready to start knitting, and I don't even know how many stitches I need to cast on. I think I'm gonna have to pull up the pattern instructions. Man, I'm feeling rusty. Okay, so all cast on and ready to go. Tension looks quite nice, although I will say definitely overestimated on how much yarn I need. So now I'm going to start knitting the rib pattern, and I thought it was just a simple rib, like, you know, knit 2, purl 2 or something, but it is actually not. It's slightly different. So this is what I'm going to be knitting for the next little bit, and hopefully the rib starts to come together. Let's go. Okay, just made it to the end of round 1, and my stitch counts ended up correctly. You know, I finished with my proper knit 3, purl 2 like I'm supposed to, which is always a bit of a relief because I find knitting the first row the hardest because the pattern isn't established yet. So for me, when I'm knitting, if I think, oh, I spaced out, maybe I made a mistake, I tend to just look at all the knitting I've already done and the pattern and see if there's a problem with the pattern. But when you have only one row, and when it's the first row, it's a little bit hard to tell, oh, did I knit 3 or did I knit 2? I can't quite tell, and then you have to really examine them. So getting to the end of the first row and having it done and not having made any mistakes, great success, means I'm also confident enough that I can actually rip off this long tail cast on, which I had kept just in case, I don't know, I made a mistake or something. But I am committing to ripping this off now and continuing with the rest of the knit, which means I can officially change my stitch counter to 1 row and keep going. So, fun fact about this wool is that these are not at all the original colors that I was planning on using for this sweater. I knew that I had to get this specific type of yarn, Drops Alpaca, right? That was the whole reason I was doing this pattern, is it was going to be a really easy knit if I used the right yarn and the right needles, and I was looking for an easy knit. And I did visit some brick and mortar shops in Montreal because I wanted to support local businesses and because I like feeling things in person. Unfortunately, however, none of the shops that I visited actually carried drops, so I figured, okay, I'll try and buy it online instead. And the problem I hit there was that it was really hard to nail down what the colors actually looked like, because depending on which website you looked at, the same color varied wildly from photo to photo. So sometimes a brown would look really dark and warm, but that same colorway on a different website would be much lighter, or it would be much cooler. And since I was trying to find not just one color, but 2 colors that paired well together, it was really difficult and I was getting kind of frustrated. Fortunately, my roommate came to the rescue and she had discovered another yarn shop that I had never been to. So we took a little field trip and visited it. It was very fun, super cute little yarn shop, and they did have Drops Alpaca. So that was really fun to just see the yarns in person and touch them, and it vastly ended up changing the colors that I went with, because originally this cerulean blue was in my head going to be a light sky blue. But when I saw the blue in person, the sky blue was just, it was very flat and plain, which is fine. Sometimes it means that the color comes across stronger if it's not broken up with other bits of other colors in it. But in this case, this cerulean blue was just much richer. It has these flecks of green and other shades of blue kind of woven in a way that actually really reminds me of my 1940s vintage coat that I made. It's a little bit darker, but it's got similar flecks of greens and purples even. This reminds me a lot of it. But then once I chose this darker cerulean blue, the brown that I was thinking I was going to use didn't actually match it very well. Like, it was okay, but it definitely wasn't as good as I would have liked. So instead of going with a warm, little bit darker brown tan color, I ended up going up with this, which is a cooler, well, relatively cooler gray tone. And I just found that was a much better color combination. I don't necessarily consider color combinations to be my strength, although some people in the comments of my videos have been saying they really enjoy my color combinations, so apparently it's something I'm getting better at, but I would not naturally have considered myself particularly good at color combos. But either way, I just consider myself super lucky to actually have been able to go to a physical yarn shop and look at this yarn in person, because it did vastly change the colors I ended up using. Alright, so here is how far I've gotten so far. That takes me to row 16. Well, currently working on 17, but my hands are starting to cramp up pretty bad. Like I said, it's been a while since I've knit anything, so I think I'm going to call it quits for today, and I'll just catch up with you at some point in the future.
Hold up, I am on my way, I'm in motion. Let's go to the ocean. Yeah, let's go outside.
The future involved heading out with a few friends to explore the city by night.
We can hang out on the beach without freezing. Yeah, isn't that amazing? In Christmas time.
Alright, I'm back, and I've gotten this far, which is the point at which I should be starting to do the cables for the waist shaping, and I have two concerns so far. One is fairly minor, and that is that I don't seem to have very much yarn left, and I only have a few more balls of this color. Like, I have the correct number of balls according to the pattern, but it just seems like it's going to be tight. So I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that I'm not going to end up playing yarn chicken on this pattern. The second concern is maybe a little bit more complicated, and that is that to get to this point here where it should be 4 inches, which it should be 34 rows. However, I am not at 34 rows. I am at 27, which is not really far off, but it's also not really close. So I'm not entirely sure. I'm hoping this isn't going to become like a big problem later on. So for now, I'm just going to write down this number for future reference and for doing the front pattern, and going to keep going, and hopefully I don't have to adjust things too much like going forward, but we'll see. So that's where I'm at, and now I'm gonna start doing the waist shaping, which is gonna need some cable needles. Alright, well, it's story time, because that was by far the weirdest interaction I have ever had with hotel personnel management of any sort in all of my years of traveling and staying in hotels. It was super bizarre, so buckle up. As you saw, I was filming that little section basically backed into a little corner of the hotel, and I searched this corner out specifically with the requirements that it be quiet, out of the way, nobody else could wander through the shot, and that it had, at least okay lighting. So I'm not bothering anybody. I'm in a really weird corner of the hotel that literally nobody is walking through. So I filmed that segment. And then I stopped and I had my knitting on my lap and I was on my phone because I wanted to check the audio to see if the audio had actually gone through to my phone. And I see out of the corner of my eye someone kind of walking towards me, and I glance up, I see that she's working for the hotel, but I figure like she's on her way to do something else. So I go back to working on my phone and she continues to approach me and then stops less than a yard away from me, but then just stands there. So after a few seconds of her standing there and not moving, but also not saying anything to me, I look up at her and she's looking at me, but she has the weirdest look on her face. She's staring at me like both condescendingly and also like I am the most suspicious individual she has seen in her hotel to date. Already I'm like, okay, this is going to be interesting. So I look over and I say yes. And she goes, "Are you staying here? Do you have a room here?" And I said, yes. And then she asked me, well, what room are you staying in? Which admittedly, it took me a second to come up with the room number because one, who keeps like their room number on the top of their head, but also because we've been staying in probably about 6 hotels in the past 7 days. So already the hotel rooms and what floors are completely a mess in my mind. So I probably did sound kind of suspicious. I like fumbled for the thing and then I came up with the room number. And then she said, "What's your last name?" So I gave her my last name. And then when she's still staring at me suspiciously, I say, I just came in with that large group. We're the circus company that arrived yesterday. And she's like, what? Like she has no idea what I'm talking about, even though she's the manager. I'm like, okay, maybe she wasn't working yesterday or maybe she didn't hear me, so I repeated it. I'm here with the large group of performance circus artists. We're doing the show across the street. We came in yesterday on the huge bus. To which she says nothing and then just continues to stare at me. So at this point, I'm like mildly irritated. So I literally just go back to my phone and continue like doing stuff for about 10 seconds when she still hasn't done anything and she's still just standing there staring at me. So I look back up at her and I ask her, "Is there a problem here?" And she goes, "Yes, you can't film here. It's against policy to film on hotel in the hotel." To which I like literally held up my knitting and I was like, I was just like talking a little bit about my knitting. And she was like, "Yes, but you can't film in public in the hotel. It's against our policy. That's why you were reported." Already the verbiage, I'm like, okay. So I said, okay, I'm sorry. I'll go back to my room to film. If it's really that big of a deal, there's no light up there, so that's why I was down here. To which she just kind of stares at me. And it was such a weird interaction because, like, I understand if it's against policy, there are some strange policies, and she's not the one who makes the policies. She's most likely just the one who enforces the policy. And I generally try not to take out stupid policies on the people enforcing them because I understand it's not their fault. So, like, she could have just come up to me and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, one of my employees said she saw you filming here, and I just wanted to let you know that it's against hotel policy to film in public, and that if you want to do it, you have to do it in your room." And I would have been like, okay, that's fine, thank you, sorry about that, I'll go up to my room. Could have been a very pleasant, normal interaction. But instead, the entire time, her tone was so condescending, and she was just regarding me like I was the most suspicious person she's seen in her entire lifetime. I didn't belong in the hotel. I obviously was squatting there. I could never have a room there. And then also the fact that she was the one that had the issue with me, but that I was the one that had to initiate every instance of conversation. That her tactic was just, I'm gonna stand there and stare, but not say anything, which was super weird. And I found it kind of disrespectful, especially because, like, if I was a paying client, like, obviously I'm not paying for the hotel rooms, it's the company. But if I was a paying client, I would feel like kind of disrespected about it. I don't know, I just thought the whole thing was really kind of rude. I've kind of lost my taste for filming, and anyway, it's about time to go to the theater. So I'm done with it for now. Gonna get something to eat, gonna go to the theater. I'll probably see you at the show. This theater was gorgeous, with a huge stage door and a large and well-lit loading area, which everybody with large props especially appreciated. Phil and I set to work unloading our pole, which is not unreasonably long, but does require some help and is not necessarily quick either. Once it's all set up, then we always climb and go set the trims just to make sure that none of the scenery or lights are so low that we hit them.
2 feet of my trim here would be good.
Saying 2 feet would be enough.
Stop. Tiny bit more.
Every venue is different, so we do this at every single theater.
Yeah, how's that weight?
Then, once we're done with that, it's time to get ready for the show. Well, that about does it for this one. I hope you'll join me in a few days for even more crafting fun. I know that this episode was very heavy on the knitting, so perhaps in the next one I'll try and switch gears and get started on a little bit of sewing, probably in the form of some chicken scratch, because I know that that concept intrigued a lot of y'all in the comments, so maybe I'll get a head start on some of that. I have some very fun ideas that I'm contemplating doing. Also, we'll be in Savannah, which I'm really looking forward to. I hear we're being launched in a very cute part of town, so really looking forward to that. Either way, it's gonna be a hoot, tons of stuff to look forward to, so be sure to tune in for that. Additionally, I see that some of you have been leaving questions and comments down below. Trust me, I am reading them all, I am making a list of the questions, and I am just enjoying so much all of the comments, so please keep them coming. They are bringing an immense amount of joy to my heart, reading just everything that everyone is doing, all of the love and energy and creativity that's being poured into the presents that you're crafting, things that you're working on, and also really enjoying everybody weighing in on the Christmas lights debate, because there are some interesting combinations down there that I didn't even consider for Christmas decorations. So thank you so much for sharing all of your traditions, opening up, telling me what it is that you'll be doing for the holiday season, because it is really helping me get in the holiday spirit over here. So keep them coming, and just know that I'm really enjoying them. That's gonna do it for me. I'm going to once again wipe off the makeup and go to bed, because we are hitting the road tomorrow. So take care, have a lovely day, and I'll catch you in the next Vlogmas. Bye! Whew. Wow, that's what I want for Christmas. I want a Christmas elf to come wash my makeup off my face for me. You can see the pattern is coming along lovely. This is the end of my first skein of yarn. There's a problem there, which brings me to this. And I kind of dig fun and funky, and also they're two colors that I really like, so that could be an option. I don't know. Hello friends, and welcome to day 4 of Vlogmas. We are currently in Savannah, Georgia. It was a very long drive. Yesterday we got stuck in traffic, so we ended up being about 8 hours in the bus, had to go directly to the theater, loading in, doing all of the various verifications, and nobody got back to the hotel to check in until about 10 p.m. last night, which means that today, this morning, is the only time we have to visit, and once I eat breakfast, I'm guessing I'm gonna get about 2.5 hours maybe to see the city, and I'm quite excited to do so because I've heard very good things about it. So I'm gonna get some breakfast, and then we are gonna go visit Savannah. So right away we found this amazing looking bookstore which seemed cozy and aesthetic and apparently had resident cats, which absolutely sounded like the dream to me. What's not to love right there? Additionally, they had a stunning door handle that I just couldn't get enough of, but unfortunately it wasn't open for another hour, so we decided to continue on the walk and swing back on the way back to the hotel. Now, if you've never been to Savannah, one of the highlights of their historic district is apparently the squares. There are 4 original ones, which date back to the early 1700s, and by the mid-1800s, they had reached a peak of 24 squares, of which 22 still exist today, and they're a stunning haven of green in the middle of downtown. If these look familiar at all, it's because one of these squares is actually where Forrest Gump's famous bench scenes were filmed. Plus, right across the street from that bench, we found the cutest cafe with the perfect mix of eclectic furnishings and decor that invited us to sit down for a delicious cup of coffee. It was only a short pause though, because we had so much left to visit. Happy to report that Savannah also boasts excellent tree climbing facilities with amazing and unrivaled views on the harbor, a fact that all of their touristic websites seem to have neglected to mention. After a short visit to the waterside market, it was back to the bookstore. Okay, so really quick summary before I pack up and get on the bus. That was absolutely fantastic. I fell in love with Savannah. I thought it was amazing. The historical district, the waterfront, all of the old monuments and buildings and history, and also that bookstore. I am completely in love with that bookstore. I could have spent the entire day there with the books and the sofas and the kitties that were oh so friendly. My favorite spot was probably this section of the bookstore where they had personal recommendations tucked into every book from the employees who worked there about why that book was special, what made it amazing, and also, yes, you could take those specific books from that section. You didn't have to go hunting around the bookstore for them, which I thought was just an absolutely lovely touch. So if you are in the area, highly recommend the bookstore. But as it was, I had about maybe 10-15 minutes to choose a book and see the entire, store. So I did feel a little bit rushed. That was borderline stressful, but I did walk away with a book. This is what I chose. Hooked. I fully admit it was the art on the spine that caught my eye. Plus, also I do love like Peter Pan and all the various takes on it, Neverland, Hooked, all that. So looking forward to reading this. It promises to be a dark twist on the classic tale. And yeah, so I'll keep you updated on this if it's any good. And without further ado, I need to get all of my stuff in my suitcase and head out because we are hitting the road again in just a few minutes. Bye! Time for a quick knitting update because, oh boy, has a lot happened. So first of all, this is where I'm currently at. You can see the pattern is coming along lovely. We're starting to get those early twists there, but also we can see that this is the end of my first skein of yarn, which was in fact the second warning sign that something was a bit off, because I have 3 balls of this main color and then 2 balls of the contrasting color. That's all the pattern calls for. But looking at the pattern and where the color gradient between the 2 stops, this, like, for 1 ball to have gotten only this far, there's a problem there. So upon reflection of the situation, I went back and re-examined the yarns and the pattern, and it turns out I have the wrong yarn. So I have yarn type C, when really the one that I was supposed to get was yarn type A, and this mistake is entirely my fault. The seller was very clear about which yarn type I needed, and what happened was that when I was looking online at all the various websites, I was very diligent about checking the gauge and the yarn type, but then I got so excited when I found it in the store that I didn't. And I just went like, oh, look, it's drops alpaca. It's perfect. That's what I need. It's not what I need. So it turns out this is not the right type of yarn. The problem is that the pattern is looking gorgeous. So what I have done is I went ahead and made a swatch on the size needles that I've been knitting this on. So now I have my swatch. I'm going to block it tonight and then do like a little gauge count and do some mathematics to see how much I would need to adjust the pattern to do it with this yarn on this size needle. How many more balls of yarn would I need? So that's where that's at. I would love to be able to continue this with this yarn, but I would need to definitely go out and buy some more yarn. So that's happening, but because I need to go block this before I can take any measurements, and then I need to sit down and like get a piece of paper and a pen and have a clear head with a lot of energy to do these calculations, it hasn't happened yet. But I also did have an 8-hour transport where I was really bored, which brings me to this. Yes, I have taken an entire ball of the other color yarn and started on another project. Now, I don't know if I'm actually going to use this. I was kind of just like fiddling around. I was really looking for something to keep my hands busy on the bus. And I was really not in a mood to edit. I should have been editing these vlogs, but I just wasn't in the headspace for it. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that I'm not going to try and force things when I'm not in the mood. So instead, I whipped out my yarn and went through all of the patterns that I have on my computer, because I didn't have Wi-Fi, to find one that looked like it might work with the yarn that I have, given the actual gauge and everything here. And I found one, an economy jumper, super cute pattern. It's actually 3 patterns in one. I'll throw the picture of it up here. And I was very close to gauge. The gauge that I'm using is a tiny bit bigger than what the pattern calls for, but I'm okay if this doesn't fit super, super tight. So this is where we're at. It's got this really cute little pattern going on here, which I'll fully admit that when I was like here in the pattern, it was looking very questionable. I was not 100% convinced that it was gonna look good, but now that I've gotten farther, it's looking kind of cute. It's also looking a little bit small, but that's because the bottom is ribbed and it's really shrinking it in, but it should fit once it's all knit up and such, and also once I block it, everything should relax, so that will help it as well. So that's where I'm at. It's cute. Now I have a dilemma. Do I keep going with this, in which case I will also need to buy more yarn, because I'm gonna need, if this is 1 skein, I'm probably gonna need 4 skeins of this color total to make up the jumper. But also, fun fact, I don't have 4 skeins. You know what I could do? This thought literally just hit me. This could be kind of fun. I could make, because the front and the back are theoretically identical, I could do the back one color, this color, and I could do the front this color, and that would use up 4 of my 5 skeins, and then I would just have 1 skein of the blue left to do something else with. And then I guess I would just have to order the correct sized yarn for this project. That could be an option. I don't know. Literally flying by the seat of my pants on this one. So I don't know. I I had fully committed to knitting this and accepting that if I didn't like it, if it wasn't the right gauge, or if I needed to use this yarn for something else, I would frog it. And I have accepted that and I can do it, but it is looking kind of cute, so I don't know, would it be really weird to have a jumper that was 2 different colors, like one color on the front and one color on the back? Maybe, but also kind of fun and funky, and I kind of dig fun and funky, and also they're 2 colors that I really like, so that could be an option. I don't know, to be determined. That is where I'm at. Lots of knitting has happened. Most of it was unanticipated. I will say that this pattern is very cute and I really like it, and I am bummed that I ended up not having the right yarn for it, because the whole plan all along was just to do a nice, simple, easy knit that didn't require math. And yet somehow I have managed to thwart myself again. So if you've been backstage at theaters for whatever reason, you're probably already familiar with this, but one of my favorite parts of visiting all of these different venues is definitely checking out the wall art. It's a common practice for shows to decorate a section of the wall with art from their show and then have the cast and crew sign it, and I love looking around at all the various productions that played here and admiring the time and effort that gets put into all of these signature walls. What?
Arcade! Yeah.
So Showtime Story Corner? So tonight's Showtime Story Corner with Shannon has a fun little comedic mishap that happened in the middle of the show tonight. Nothing serious, it was just amusing. It affected basically only me, but that's the best kind of mishaps. So to set the stage for you, pun fully intended, there are 4 sets of double doors in our show. They're on wheels, they open in one direction kind of like saloon doors, and they're used for a variety of reasons, whether that is just to add some depth and visual variety to the stage, or to help tell the story sometimes, or to just literally camouflage entrances and exits of props and artists. Oftentimes it's kind of a combination of 2 or 3 of those reasons, but they feature pretty heavily in the show. There are doors moving the whole time. And the other important part of background information you might need is that I'm one of the first people to work the doors. Literally the opening scene of the entire show is basically 4 people and 4 sets of doors, and I'm one of those 4 people. So I have this little pre-show routine where I go, I find my door, I check which way it opens, because they only open one way, they don't swing both ways like real saloon doors, and then I like position it properly on stage so that I can roll it out without hitting anything on the floor when it's my turn to go. So the show starts, I roll my door out. We have this little moment on stage where everybody kind of switches positions, switches doors. We play with these presents. It's like a whole cheerful Christmas moment. And then there's like a knock on the house, and the 4 of us kind of panic, and we're supposed to run through our doors and close the doors behind them and hide. So the knock comes, I throw my present in the wheelbarrow, I run to the door and I go to open it, and it doesn't open. Now remember that we have changed positions, so this is not my original door, this is a different door, and it's not opening. So my first thought is, okay, maybe somebody accidentally turned the door backwards, and instead of opening out, I can just push. So I push pretty hard on the door, and it still doesn't open, and I'm like, okay, it's supposed to be like this, like it needs to happen quickly. I don't have time to think about this more, so I just jump around the door, and I'm standing behind the door, and I'm like jiggling the handle. I'm trying to figure out what on earth is going on, and I hear something out of the corner of my ear, and I look in the wings and I can see our head prop guy, and he's like mouthing and gesturing to me, and I go, oh, I realized what happened is the doors are latched. They latch the doors on top for transport in the trucks so that the doors aren't like swinging around and banging and getting damaged as we travel from city to city. But what happened is that this door is still latched, and unfortunately the latches, it's a double set of latches, and they're up at the top of the door, which is about 3 inches higher than I can reach with my hand fully extended. And I don't really have much time to deal with this, because after I go behind the door, I have about 6 to 8 seconds before there's another very obvious music and lighting cue where I'm supposed to open the door and stick my head out and look. And it's really, really obvious because like there's a spotlight that comes on the door, and because there's 4 of us and we're all doing it like on musical cues. So my cue comes and I can't get out, so once again I just like stick my head around the corner of the door and I'm like looking into the middle of the stage, but it's kind of obvious that there's something wrong because the pool of light is focused right on the center of the door where I'm supposed to be, and here I am like off to the side in the shadows. Not a big deal. I'm like, okay, it's just gonna be like this. So then we start with our main section of what I like to call doreography, because now all the doors start moving in patterns, and this one is we kind of go like this and pass each other on stage. I paired up with Phil, so we get in line and we're like starting to move across the stage, and Phil looks at me and he goes, they're latched. And I'm like, yes, I know they're latched. I'm too short to do anything about it. And the doreography is intense enough that there's no moment for him to like stop and reach over and help me, because he is right next to me, but he still can't do anything about it. So we've crossed, we hit our marks. Now all 4 doors start moving downstage towards the public, towards the audience. And once again, they all stop in a line, and there's another really obvious music and lighting cue where it goes like door, 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 door. Time out for the ventilation. So there's this really obvious cue, and again I'm like peeking out from around the side of my door when everybody else is peeking through their door, and it was just pretty funny because it was pretty apparent that there was something wrong, but it was funny because it didn't really affect anybody else. It didn't ruin the flow of the show. Nobody got hurt. After the show, the prop guy came and grabbed me and was like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. He explained what happened, and he was like, what happened was that we didn't do a cue to cue, which is true. It's the first city where we didn't do a cue to cue, because while we did them at the beginning, we are now sort of weaning off of them because they take a lot of time, and everybody's starting to get to know the show much better. So unless there's a really unusual setup in a theater, which probably will happen down the road, we're for the most part not doing cue to cues. But that's exactly where people were unlocking their own doors, and like as people were walking through the blocking of the show and where the props are going, the doors got unlatched, and that didn't happen this time. So he said now he has it on his list that he needs to go through and unlatch all of the doors just to make sure that they're open before the show started. So anyways, that was just the fun little story from tonight's show. I hope that you enjoyed it because I thought it was kind of entertaining and amusing. So that kind of conveniently wraps it up for this vlog. I hope that you will join me for the next one, where we'll probably get a little knitting update, maybe do a little bit of sewing, get started on the crazy quilt stocking, because I do have some long days of transport ahead of us. And as always, let me know what you're working on, whether it is crafting or cleaning or cooking. If you have some amazing holiday recipes coming out of your oven, let me know, because that is one of the things that I miss out on a lot, because we are always traveling for the holidays. We're often in hotel rooms like this. We rarely have access to ovens. So all of the traditional recipes of my childhood often get pushed back until, January, when it's no longer the holidays. So if you are doing some tasty holiday baking, be sure to let me know what it is that you're eating. And I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for joining me this time. Bye. and welcome to day 5 of Vlogmas. I'm Shannon Makes, Christmas crafter by day, circus artist by night, and never has that been more true than in this series as I'm traveling around the US with a touring Christmas production and filling pretty much every spare moment with some sort of crafting. Last episode, we had just left Savannah and the cutest little bookstore ever and headed to the next city for a little knitting update, which involved a bit of a plot twist. So if you haven't seen that and you'd like to get all caught up on it, there is a Vlogmas playlist linked right up in the corner as well as in the description, so you can make sure you're all up to date. Today, we're in Charleston, South Carolina, a city that I didn't really know much about and wasn't unusually excited to visit until I found out that this is where Stede Bonnet, gentleman pirate of the seas, and frequent inspiration for this channel, drew his last breath. So now I'm super excited to go out and visit Charleston and learn about some of this super interesting history. And fortunately, we do actually have quite a bit of time before tonight's show in which to do that. So I'm really looking forward to that, but first I figure let's do a little bit of work on the chicken scratch project that I mentioned in the very first episode. Also, let's just acknowledge the elephant in the room, which is the giant jacuzzi hot tub in the middle of the bedroom. Let's not talk about it. It's weird. So in my first Vlogmas episode, I mentioned that I was bringing this gingham on tour to try my hand at some chicken scratch embroidery, which was inspired by some vintage aprons I had found at a local antique store. And I thought that, first of all, they were super cute, but also that the scope of that project was going to be very manageable for me while I was on tour. Because, as we have kind of discovered through the course of this series, I do not often have access to large flat surfaces or sewing machines or kind of any other sewing tool besides scissors, needle, and thread. And that's not to say that you need all these fancy tools for sewing, not at all. In fact, I have two videos, this one and this one, which are literally directly kind of trying to fight the notion that you need a lot of fancy tools and a big budget to make beautiful clothes. They're really great videos. I tackle some really fun challenges on a really tight budget and with some creative use of tools. But I will also say that while I'm here on tour, I just have very, very limited energy to do creative problem solving. And also we're like packing things up literally every day to travel. So I'm looking for like very simple projects that don't take a ton of brain power. And as we've already seen, my knitting plans kind of took a curve into the more complicated, so trying to stay simple with my sewing. That's why I decided to bring the gingham and bust it out and get started on some chicken scratch because it looks very fun and very simple. However, after about 15 seconds of Googling how to do chicken scratch embroidery, I realized I need an embroidery hoop and I do not have an embroidery hoop with me, so the actual sewing is gonna have to wait until I can get my hands on one. But in the meantime, I thought let's just talk about the design plans, get that phase sort of figured out, and that way once I do get my hands on a hoop, I can just jump right in with the actual sewing and the planning process will be mostly figured out. So with that said, I'm thinking I want to sew an apron. Figured it would be very suitable, kind of based off of the inspiration for this whole project. Let's start with an apron. Then my next logical thought was, well, let's do this apron pattern. If you watched the first Vlogmas episode, you will recognize it because I went over it. It is my cobbler's apron, but once I pulled it out and started looking at it again, it's maybe not quite the design that I had in mind for this apron. I had something more along the lines of this, with like basically a simple gathered rectangular panel for the skirt portion, some sort of belt, and then a basic pinafore style top. Actually not too far off from my zero waist apron pattern, which I actually could use that or a variation of that for this apron as well. But if y'all really like this pattern and you want to see me do this one with the chicken scratch motif, let me know. We can consider doing that. Otherwise, if you have a vintage pattern that's more along the lines of this, what I was originally thinking, throw recommended patterns in the comments. So then next I figured let's look at some of the inspiration images that I've been finding, because I have been trying to gather some images, things that I really like, motifs that I want to replicate, and I thought let's look at them together so we can all get on the same page, and also you can give me your input, what you think that I should do. The first image that I found that I really fell in love with was this one right here. It's this lovely blue gingham with this lace style embroidery on it. And what I really love about this is how it takes something just super simple as, you know, just basic gingham fabric, and makes it look super fancy and intricate. Super fancy for me. I think it looks super fancy. So if I remember correctly, the website that I got this image from, she said that she had done all of the stitches in either 2 or 3 strands of embroidery floss, except for the square border at the top and the bottom, which is more like 6 strands, which I really like that effect. It makes the lacy bits look lacy, but then it really like solidifies the border. I thought that was super cool. The only thing that I was less interested in was the fact that it's very un-Christmassy. So I thought, like, let's look for some Christmas specific motifs. And my very first result that popped up was a Christmas tree. There are a couple different images that have been floating around with Christmas tree motifs. I think I prefer this second one here, maybe just because it's better quality, but also it seems to have a slightly different use of yellow in it. And I really like this. I think it's very cute, but I also think it could easily look a bit gaudy if not used with care, if it's too big, if there are a ton of them. So what I was thinking was, what if we do a couple Christmas trees, but we keep them limited to patch pockets? So, you know, like maybe like about this size, maybe we do 2 of them. They can be symmetrical on the apron. They can be nice, big, practical patch pockets, but with a little touch of whimsy. But again, not too much Christmas, not too gaudy. Again, remember, I'm the one with the plain white Christmas lights, so that's kind of the direction I personally am leaning in. And then I wanted to find something to do kind of along the bottom hem of the skirt of the apron. So that led me to find this image here, which seems to be some sort of placemat. And you can see it's got kind of 2 different motifs. It's got the chunky corners, and then it has this slightly more delicate lacy motif that connects the corners. And what I'm thinking, because I really love this, if we look at this other alternative view of it, I just love how it's a little bit more subtle. It's just mostly greens and whites with these little hints of red that keep it like classy, not too gaudy. So I think I'm really enjoying this specific motif, and I'm wondering if I can do something where if we take the hem of the skirt, we take 2 corners, the corner motifs on either edge of the hem, and then we connect them with the lacy motif from this image here. The lace would obviously be a lot longer because the skirt's going to be much wider than this placemat. And then I don't think I'll do anything going up the edges of the apron, or maybe I would do like a little bit of the lacy motif but kind of feather it off into nothing. And then I think what would be really cool would be to mirror that motif but in a smaller scale along the top portion of the apron, so the part that covers your chest. And I think I would like to do it a little bit lighter, because for me personally, I find it a little bit more balanced when the heavier motif is at the bottom and the lighter motif up towards the top. So if we could just replicate it, so you tie the 2 parts of the apron together, but find a way to make it like a little bit lighter or a little bit smaller, something like that. So that's kind of what I'm leaning towards. What I really like is that this uses colors of embroidery floss that I have with me. So if we look at the close-up image, it looks like it's got 2 different greens, a darker and a medium green, and then 1 red and a white. And I have all of those colors with me on tour. Those were literally the only colors that I brought with me. I have kind of a hodgepodge, so We might be using multiple shades of green throughout the project, but I don't want to go buy more thread. Let's just use what I have with me. And yeah, so that's kind of what I'm thinking in terms of designs. Let me know if you have other ideas. You've got some cute motifs. I did find a really cute snowflake pattern. Let's see if I can find it. It is on red gingham. Let's use our imagination and put it on green gingham. And I love that it's like very delicate, very whimsical, a cute little snowflake. What I thought was maybe we could include some kind of just lightly scattered over the body of the apron. But then I was wondering, is that gonna be too much? Like with the Christmas trees and the border at the bottom and the border at the top, is it gonna be too much to also have snowflakes? So I don't know. What do we think on the snowflake portion? Be sure to weigh in. Let me know what you're thinking. Are there other ideas that I haven't thought of? Should I be using this pattern and then sewing it up later at home? Should I be going more with my initial mental image of the apron? Decisions to be made. But for now, I'm gonna put that aside and I'm gonna go into Charleston and take a tour of the historic city. So let's get dressed and let's go. I knew nothing about Charleston heading into town and was happy to discover that the city was actually really lovely. The weather still didn't feel like Christmas to me, but it was still a very cheerful visit and the architecture made up for the palm trees. Then we met up with another cast member to take a tour of the town dungeon, built in the 1770s. There's actually far more to the building than that, but that was what drew us there for the tour.
All right, this is a great question. 25 years ago, the museum paid somebody to do a survey of how many bricks are in the building. Okay? You ready? So here it is. Here's the specific number that they gave them after a couple tens of thousands of dollars. 1 to 2 million bricks. You could have. That's what I was thinking. All right, so please watch your step because the brick floor that you're going to be walking on is older than the country itself. Therefore, the footing is even more precarious through the streets of Charleston. And the cellar is going to be designated their military prison, their provost, this location where those who have been reprimanded within their own army are going to be concealed. We're going to get to that in a second.
Well, that was super fun. We all really enjoyed it, had a great time. Our tour guide was both knowledgeable and entertaining, and his enthusiasm for the history and the topics at hand were equally matched by his enthusiasm to discover that there were a bunch of circus artists taking his tour who were performing later that night not far from his house. So we did invite him to come see the show tonight. We hope that he'll be there, but you never know. Unfortunately, we did not get to go visit Stede Bonnet's grave. That ended up being another 15-minute walk away, and we just didn't have time. We had to come back here for the show, but it was super fun to learn about the very rich and, to me, surprising history of pirating in Charleston. There was a ton of it happening. That was very surprising for me to learn until you consider that actually Charleston at that point was the richest city in all of the colonies at the time. So there was just a lot of money, a lot of goods, trade, influential people coming and going. So it does seem like a prime target for pirating. I could honestly go on and on. I was fascinated by the history, but I will just say that I could easily have spent another day there learning about the history, studying the architecture, eating all the good food, and finding the cutest dogs to pet. So if you are there, if you're in town, definitely recommend taking some tours of the historic city, learning about it, and if you happen to visit Stede Bonnet's grave, please send me a photo. It was just something I would have liked to do, just didn't have the time because I had to come back here and do a show. So let's go do a show. The show was a good one, Charleston was a great audience, and then before we knew it, it was time to tear down and head out. have been getting some questions about the food and eating situation on the road, which is understandable because nutrition is important for everyone, but it's kind of extra important for us in our situations because we're working with our bodies, and if we get sick, that really messes up the run of the show. Plus, we just want to have enough energy and stamina and feel good for what is a very rigorous and grueling tour schedule. We don't want to eat out. That gets really old really fast. We have this guy, and it is an absolute lifesaver. So this is basically a hot plate and pot all in one, which is very, very fun because it means, well, one, it means you can't really set anything on fire, which is always a benefit. Hotels tend to not like you having hot plates. It's usually not allowed because they are like a fire hazard. But this, you can't set anything on fire with it. It just sits right on the counter. The bottom doesn't get hot. It plugs in right in the handle. And it's been amazing. Honestly, absolute lifesaver. It boils water pretty quickly. It's been cooking all of our meals. So what we've been doing is going out and getting the packets of rice and then getting some sort of vegetable. This did come with a steamer that fits right in the top. So we've been steaming a lot of vegetables. Other times we'll cook them. I do have a little bit of oil here so I can cook some vegetables, and then we'll often get a meat as well, a protein. So if we are in a situation where we don't have time to cook, or if we have to travel with it, I have been doing canned meat. Not my favorite choice, but honestly pretty practical given the situations. But if we're in a city like this one where we're here for 2 days, I'll try and go grocery shopping on the first day and get a small enough package of meat that I can cook enough today to last me for a meal today and tomorrow. We've also been doing our coffees in the morning with this little guy. It's a portable coffee maker. It's silicone. It collapses. It's very, very slick. And just so we don't get too homesick, we've got our Tim Hortons with us. So that's what we've been doing in terms of eating, and it's been working very well for us. We do admittedly sometimes eat out in restaurants, but not very often. People often think that that's like a perk of being on the road, is that you eat all your meals out, but honestly, for us anyway, it gets pretty old pretty fast, and sometimes you just want vegetables that aren't soaked in oil and that you've cooked yourself. So really enjoying the setup we've got going, and this little puppy is an absolute lifesaver. Okay friends, so today's patterns all come from one of my favorite antique stores, which happens to be right around the corner from my parents' house. So I am frequently in there bopping in. I always check out their selection of patterns, and that's actually a little bit more complicated than it sounds because it's one antique store and it's 2 levels, basement and main floor, but they basically sell space in that store to different vendors. So I think they told me last time I was in there that they had 52 different vendors. So it's not like you walk in and there's one clear sewing section. There's you have to go to every stall and check out do they have any sewing supplies. Fortunately, I've been there enough that I kind of have a feel for which vendors tend to have sewing supplies or patterns, notions, that type of thing. So I can be a little bit more efficient about it. But if I have time, I always swing by and check out everything because you never know when somebody's gonna have gone to an estate sale, for example, and have gotten patterns when they usually don't. But there's one vendor that always have patterns, and I always sit down and go through, and it's very fun. So there are a bunch of patterns from that. The first one here, this one actually does not have the original envelope. It probably was in very rough shape. So that means we don't have a year on it. I will try to use a Google image search to see if I can find out more information on this pattern, but judging by the hat and the haircut, I'm guessing maybe early 40s, somewhere in there. I'm definitely not an expert, but what caught my eye is I really enjoy these little bits right there that are they've got the stripes going horizontally, whereas the rest of the dress has them going vertically. So I thought that was kind of fun. Not really loving it when they're in lace over here. Very much not my style personally. Really much more enjoying the play with the geometric, the stripes, and also how it's echoed down here on the hips too. I'm guessing that those are for pockets, and if they're not, if I make the dress, they're gonna be where the pockets go. It does not say what size it is, unfortunately. We've got to look at the back here. I don't even know honestly what brand it is because even the brand is cut off, but I bet once I open it, there's gonna be the brand on here. So let's literally have not opened hardly any of these patterns. So the fact that there is a thick wad, instantly encouraging. I'm gonna see if I can find any instructions. What is kind of fun is I can see that the person who used this used a tracing wheel because some of these patterns, I don't think you're gonna be able to see it, but they have perforations from where the tracing wheel punched through. Okay, we've got actually the pattern number on here is 7185, and then it also says 20. So I'm wondering if that means it's a size 20. As we can see, this one has been cut out and used, but also everything is folded up and in very good condition. So I'm hopeful that there are all the pieces here. And as we can see, it's a very thick wad. There are a lot of pieces here. So I am hopeful about that, but there do not seem to be, oh yes, there are. Oh, they were just hiding instructions. Let's see what we learn from the instructions. Okay, it's McCall's. McCall's Cut and Sew Guide 7185. Again, we have instructions, how to cut, cutting with pinking shears, tailor's tacks, so some basic information on here, and then cutting layout, lots and lots of cutting layouts here, and then assembly instructions on the back, which is kind of fun. Very fun, love it. So that just about does it for this one. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I apologize that there wasn't quite as much crafting content in this one as I had hoped, purely due to poor planning on my part, but hopefully we can get my hands on an embroidery hoop shortly, can start on some actual chicken scratch, and also I will have a knitting update for you in the next city, which is Detroit. Quite looking forward to that one. Not entirely sure what to expect from the city itself, but I have heard that we're in a very gorgeous and historic theater, so I am definitely looking forward to that one. Be sure to tune in to see all about the theater and for all those crafting updates. Thank you so much. I hope you're having a great day, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye! Today is a 3-show day, which means a couple things. One, it means that I will be doing 6 acts in a relatively short span of time, but it also means that I will have a lot of downtime between shows, and I would really like to be doing some knitting in that downtime. And we're gonna use this to measure and see where I am gauge-wise, and that should hopefully help determine which way I'm gonna move forward on this pattern. All right, so we're heading out later today, hitting yet another city, more fun places to explore. I think we are heading to Detroit, but it is a little bit of a later bus call, so I have time this morning to sit down and chat, so I thought I would pull out my jumpsuit, repair the buttons on this while I answered some of your questions. And first of all, I just wanted to say I've been getting a lot of love and appreciation in the comments for this jumpsuit, which has been featuring rather heavily in this Vlogmas series. And if you've been here a while, you will know about the backstory of this jumper, how it took me several months to hunt down all of the different towels that went into making it. Very fun video. If you haven't seen it, I will be sure to link it up here and then in the description as well, so you can check it out if you are so inclined. But just wanted to say thank you to everybody for the love on the jumpsuit. Some of you were slightly surprised or heartwarmed to see me wearing it, and I have to say I actually wear it all the time. Pretty much any cold weather contract I am wearing this. You guys don't see it very often unless you're a Patreon or a Coffee member. Then you will have seen this make an appearance last year in the vlog from last year's Christmas contract, because I was wearing it all the time on that contract. It was freezing in that tent, so very practical, and I've used it so much that the buttons are now in need of a little bit of tightening. So I think I'm just gonna go through and redo pretty much all of the buttons so that I don't lose one. And while I do that, I'll be answering some of your questions. So the first question that I've been getting the most is by far, where is Canal? What does she do while you're on tour, and who is watching her? And first of all, I have to say that generally she always comes with us. This is actually the first time that she hasn't come with us on a tour of this length. So she's been to Switzerland, to Italy, to Germany and Denmark with us. She's usually always with us unless we're doing a very short contract where it's just not worth it for us to bring her. So like we did a week in Singapore. She definitely did not need to come along for that. She is with her grandparents and enjoying some socializing with their dog as well, some bonding time. So that's been good for her, but we are very much missing her. And since I am missing her, I'm missing the snow, and y'all are also missing the corgi content, I thought, let's just enjoy a little Winter Wonderland adventure from last year's Christmas contract. Now that we've gotten our puppy friskies out, let's shake the snow off our boots and return to a much more temperate Charleston for yet another question. Someone asked a very intriguing question, I thought, and that was, how big or small is the circus world, and how often do you work with the same people repeatedly on different contracts? And it's kind of a complicated question, but it's so fascinating. So I would say that there are different sub-genres or categories of circus work. You have people who do the European cabaret dinner theater circuit. You have the traditional American circus side of things. You have the more modern American circus circuit. And then you also have people who do almost exclusively one-off gigs, corporate events, halftime shows, that sort of thing. And so the answer is that if you are working, at least in my experience, if you're working in a different sub-genre of circus than I am, our paths might cross once. We'll stay aware of what each other is doing, but the chances of working on the same contract a second time is much lower than if you are in the same type of category of circus work as I am. So we tend to do mostly the European dinner theater circuit. And in that case, we do cross paths and work with the same people a few times. It's not unusual, but it's also not so small that like we're all always working together. There are a lot of artists out there, and I don't think I've ever worked with anyone more than a couple times in different contracts. And I think that's pretty a common experience. Like, it's hard for me to say exactly because obviously, like, I don't do like the traditional American circuit, like 3-ring circus, ringling, that sort of thing. So their experiences might be very different. But I will say that it has led, in my experience, to a very lovely phenomenon where circus artists are often very open to making friends and making friends quickly because we live a rather nomadic life. We have these short but occasionally quite intense contracts where everybody is like living together and people form friendships really quickly. But then we also are aware that we're gonna go off and do other contracts, and it might be years before we see these same people, these same artists again. So it's really not unusual to make friends on a contract, not see them again for years, and then get a message out of the blue from somebody being like, hey, I'm in your city for a day or two. Do you want to hang out? Can we grab coffee? Are you doing a show? Can I come see it? So I do feel like that's led to this really beautiful phenomenon where we have this widespread network of friends across the world that we don't see very frequently, but that we have no qualms about picking that friendship up again immediately, even if it's been years and years since we've seen them. So to answer your question, the circus world is quite small, but also it's much larger than you think, and we don't tend to work with the same people so often, maybe a few times over the span of, a career. Hello friends, I am in lovely Detroit. It is quite early and today is a 3-show day, which means a couple things. One, it means that I will be doing 6 acts in a relatively short span of time and I'm going to be kind of tired by the end of today, but it also means that I will have a lot of downtime between shows and I would really like to be doing some knitting in that downtime. But if you remember from the last knitting update, I have a bit of a quandary. It turns out I have the wrong yarn, a dilemma, if you will, because I actually chose the wrong yarn for the pattern. So while I was originally going to do that lovely ribbed jumper, the Aurora pattern, I have potentially the wrong yarn for it, and I'm either going to need a lot more of that yarn or I'm not sure what to do with that exactly. But then, if we also remember, I did switch gears kind of impromptu on the bus and knit up this other sample, the economy jumper in the gray wool, and that could also be an option to continue with that pattern. So I need to decide what I'm gonna do. Am I gonna go with the original Aurora ribbed pattern or the economy jumper? And to that end, I have done a very responsible thing and knit up a gauge swatch. And I was even so responsible that I did properly block it using potentially some questionable techniques in the hotel room. It is now properly blocked, and I also have this that I brought with me, not anticipating that I was going to actually use it, but I do have it, and we're going to use this to measure and see where I am gauge-wise, and that should hopefully help determine which way I'm going to move forward on this pattern, with the original Aurora one or the economy jumper. Maybe an unusual technique to count stitches, but I find my eyes just get all mixed up and I lose track of where I am pretty easily. But just sort of leapfrogging these 2 pins really helps me count without getting mixed up to where I am in the pattern. So tickle me shocked, but I'm actually really close to having the ideal gauge based off of my measurements. So this swatch here has 21 stitches and 29 to 30 rows. I was having a little bit of a hard time measuring my rows, even with the little needles to help me, but the ideal gauge should then be 23 stitches and 30 rows. So honestly, that's really good. Like, that's super close. So I think what the game plan is, because I do love the colors and I do love like the original idea I had for this jumper. So I'm gonna continue on with this yarn and these needles, and it's just gonna mean that I need more yarn. But I'm not entirely sure how much yarn, and I also don't know where I'm gonna get it yet because it is kind of tricky to get this yarn in the States. So I'm gonna continue on a little bit further with my pattern. I have marked how far the first ball of yarn got me, and as I continue to knit a little bit more, once I run out of the second ball of blue, I will also mark where that is, and hopefully by that point I'll be able to determine how much more yarn I'll need, and then I can look into where I'm gonna get that yarn, how I'm gonna get it, and how many more balls I'm gonna need. Hi.
I gotta go.
Gotta go, bye.
I have a show to do.
Yeah. Really quick before we go into the theater and start the show, I did want to make a little note because I've been getting some absolutely lovely comments and offers from various people wanting to buy me yarn to finish the sweater. And as you can see now, I will not be switching yarns. I will be using the yarn that I currently have. I just will be needing a bit more of it. Although I do admit it would be fun to knit the sweater in the intended wool and just do a compare and contrast. But first things first, let me just finish this version as it is. But what I wanted to say was those are incredibly generous and kind offers, but you do not need to buy me yarn. If you really would like to, you can do so virtually on my Ko-fi account. It's like a website similar to Patreon, except that you can leave one-time tips. You don't have to sign up for monthly memberships. So if you are absolutely dying to buy me some virtual yarn, you can head on over there and leave me a little tip, but also please, zero obligations. The whole point of this Vlogmas series was to avoid the sort of commercialization and feeling pressured to spend money on all the things that are out there. So really, don't worry about it. Only do it if it's something that you're super passionate about and you are in a position financially to do it without, causing stress on your budget. So with that said and off my shoulders, let's get into the theater and do a show.
It's cold outside.
This theater was absolutely stunning in its opulence. Built in 1927 with a blend of Eastern motifs that are heavily reminiscent of a Jumanji board, and with the capacity to seat over 5,000 people, this camera just isn't doing it justice. Just the lobby alone is mind-boggling in its level of detail. Clearly, no expense was spared in its construction. If you thought the signature wall on the previous theater was something, it doesn't hold a candle to the art here. Every last inch is covered in signatures and images of past productions, including, but not limited to, the 8-story stairwell. The theater is also known as the Temple of Amusement and has hosted artists from Shirley Temple to Elvis Presley, Frank Sinatra to Bruce Springsteen. Now, between shows on 2 and 3 show days, a meal is catered by the company and usually involves vegetables, protein, and carbs. And after eating, I decided to go upstairs to digest with some knitting. Unfortunately, I had left both my curved cable needle and my double pointed needle at the hotel, so I had to finish up the last several cable rows of the sweater with a normal needle, which fortunately I happened to have a third needle of the same size laying around, and it was a bit slower and definitely more finicky, but it got the job done, and also it's not like I'm in any sort of rush. And what does one do after a 3-show day? Well, ice skating, of course. So, quick knitting update, and I apologize if there's a lot of background noise. The AC unit is right underneath us here, but also this is the only place in the entire room that gets any light. So I'm gonna do my best to edit the audio, but if there's a little hum in the background, I'm very sorry. So taking a look at what I got done yesterday, it is quite a lot because look at this. A lot of progress has been made. So we can see that I finished the entire cable section and then continued on to the rib section up above. And if we look on this side, we can see I have all the markers here. So this is how far the first ball got me. This is how far the second ball of yarn got me. And now I'm on my third ball here. Still have quite a lot of it left, but I stopped for 2 reasons. One, because I ran out of time, but also because this, I need to stop when it measures 11 inches, and it is kind of approaching 11 inches, but I also didn't have a ruler on hand. So I took a pause there. I'm gonna measure it now and see how many more rows I need to do until we do hit that 11-inch mark. And then I'm also gonna be able to know how much more yarn I'm going to need. And thankfully, my roommate back in Montreal has agreed to go help me out and go grab some more yarn from the original store where I got this, because drops is really hard to buy in the US, especially when you don't have a stable mailing address. We're only in hotels for maximum 2 days each now, basically until we hit Philadelphia. So I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be reliable to ship more of this yarn. So I think I'm going to have my roommate pick me up some more. I should have enough to finish the front of the sweater and possibly also the sleeves while I'm here on tour, and then probably just have to finish it in Montreal unless I can manage to get some yarn shipped to me in Philadelphia. So that's where we're at. I'm super pleased with it. It's looking very, very cute, and now the next step for this is just going to be to get a ruler and measure it out, and once I hit 11 inches, we're gonna switch to our secondary color, and I'm very excited to see how that's going to look once it's like actually knitted into the primary color. So as it turns out, Detroit was so jam-packed that we're actually gonna have to spend part of the next episode here as well, continuing to explore the city and that gorgeous theater, catching up on the book that I picked out back in Savannah, and making some progress on all of my various sewing projects. So be sure to stay tuned for that. Plus, there was also a wild ride of a costume mishap that was absolutely hilarious and that I'm convinced you're gonna love as well. So be sure to tune in next week to hear all the lovely details on that as well. Everyone had some lovely suggestions in the comment section about the design choices for the chicken scratch embroidery and the apron I'll be using it on, so thank you so much for that. I have to say that the vast majority of comments so far are also leaning towards a more pinafore bib style apron, and I've also even gotten some really fun pattern suggestions to use on that, so thank you so much. I know I'm struggling to keep up with responding on all of the comments, but I am absolutely reading them all, so keep them coming. I am really enjoying them, as well as all the feedback and the suggestions, tips, tricks, all of that fun stuff. Thank you so much. I also wanted to add that I don't want anybody to feel like they have to watch all of these Vlogmases as they're coming out. If you are feeling like there's just too much to be done this holiday season, I know it can be a very busy time of the year. Feel free to watch them at your own pace. like well after the holidays if that is what works for you. I don't think that they're too overtly Christmas in nature that they would be unenjoyable to watch after the holidays have already passed. So if you're feeling pressured or stressed to like keep up with them, don't worry about it. It's the internet. They'll be out there forever waiting for you when you are ready to watch them. So thank you so much for hanging out with me again today, and I will catch you in the next episode back here in Detroit. Bye! So here are the results. I did go off script a little bit. Can anyone find the error that I made here? And I was starting to warm up when all of a sudden I heard the sound that nobody wants to hear, which was this lovely rip. Hello friends, and welcome back to another installment of this year's Vlogmas, where I'm traveling around the US with a touring Christmas circus show and documenting all of my various crafting exploits. We've visited West Palm Beach, Savannah, Charleston, and found historic buildings, cute bookstores, and more. That, along with all the previous crafting endeavors, will be linked in a playlist up there as well as in the description if you're new here and you'd like to get all caught up. Last episode we left off in Detroit, and that's actually where we'll pick up again because we were here for a whopping 3 days, a real treat on this tour where we've been constantly city hopping and so much happened. But I did find when I was editing this vlog that it was feeling a little bit short on crafting content, so first we're going to hop forward into the future for a little thrifting crafting update, and then we'll get back to the normal timeline and the beautiful city of Detroit. Okay, time for a thrifting update because in one of the more exciting pit stops on our trip, I was able to run off to Goodwill while everybody else made a lunch stop at Walmart. So they all ran into the Walmart to get food, and I beelined for the thrift store because that's very much more my jam. And it was a success because I found some very interesting things. Now, this Goodwill was kind of in the middle of nowhere. It was just next to a highway somewhere. I didn't have big expectations, but I was thrilled to discover that actually they had a very nice crafting section. So I didn't get a ton of footage because I was running very tight on time, but I did manage to grab some footage of all the fabric that they had, including a lot of fat quarters for 99 cents, all from Joann's, and in some very fun colors and patterns. There were also a couple skeins of very festive green yarn, and then a bunch of other Ziploc bags just full of combinations of some very cute fabrics, and again at a very reasonable price, including one small quilt kit, which I opened it and looked at it. It seemed to be complete, so I was actually really happy with the crafting section in this Goodwill. I am, however, quite tight on luggage space, so I did leave most of it for somebody else who would use it and enjoy it without needing to fit it into a suitcase. But I did manage to grab a few things, starting with this sweater right here, which I think is just super cute. I didn't necessarily need another sweater, but it was very festive, and I also really enjoyed the pattern on the front here. If anybody knows what the name of this particular knit pattern is, please let me know in the comments because I really dig it and I would love to try to use it myself at some point. So throw that down there if you know what it is. But everything else is crafting related because it's small and cheap and fits very easily in my luggage. So starting off, got a couple of things for the crazy quilt stocking that I did already start on. You'll see that eventually, including some vintage rickrack in a very festive green color and some cute white bows, and they were both 99 cents. Basically all of the crafting supplies that I got were 99 cents, which is such a steal. So there, some very fun little touches, as well as slightly unusual, but a whole range of sequins. Again, 99 cents. But I remember seeing some stitches when I was going through Pinterest and looking at various embroidery designs. I did see some that utilized not just beads but also sequins. So I grabbed this thinking, hey, let's find some creative ways to work this in. They're very festive colors. I think it's gonna be a fun challenge. And then the last thing for the crazy quilt stocking was I did manage to grab one fat quarter, and it is just basically white. There is a very subtle pattern on it, which I'm not sure if it's showing up for you, but I figured I have a lot of reds and greens and almost no whites. So I grabbed this thinking I could use it to imitate either the fur that's often at the top of the stockings, or sometimes they highlight like the heel and the cap of the stocking. So I figured it would come in handy. It's good. It's gonna make the colors of the embroidery floss really pop. So got that. And then lastly, I got this kind of fun vintage pattern. It's from 1980, and I mainly got it because I liked the neckline on that vest right there. The rest of it, not necessarily my style, but for a whopping $1.99, I was like, why not? That vest alone is worth $2. So snatch that one right up. It is from McCall's from 1980, so kind of a fun little thrift store find. And then I did manage to have time at the very end of that trip to run in and grab from Walmart a embroidery hoop. Now, I know a lot of you said that I don't need an embroidery hoop, I can just do it freehand, which I probably could, but it was right there and it was only a couple dollars. I also want to highlight some of the very creative solutions that some of you came up with, very much on the same level of making do and MacGyvering something. So we have carving out a peanut butter lid and using some zip ties. That was my personal favorite. A couple people suggesting to use safety pins and pinning the work to my jeans. Also very creative. However, I don't have jeans with me and I don't think that would be very comfortable on the bus, which is where I'm going to be doing a lot of this embroidery. And then for a little quick update, I did actually, as soon as I got my hands on this, I did try some chicken scratch. So here are the results. I'm very pleased with them. So first up, we have the traditional white lace pattern. This is basically an exact replica of the blue gingham image that I showed you in the last episode. I did go off script a little bit because I kind of messed up one section. And also I was trying some different thread weights. So some of this is done with 2 strands, some of it is done with 3 and 4 strands, and then the thicker ones here, some have 4 and some have 6. I was just playing with seeing if it made a big difference, what looks I liked. In the end, it didn't actually make that big of a difference, so probably not gonna worry too much about it, but absolutely love the way it turned out, the look of it, and it was so relaxing to do. So I really enjoyed that. And then I also tried the green style from the placemat that I showed you, except can anyone find the error that I made here? So usually when you're doing chicken scratch, if you're using the lighter colored floss, then you're leaving the holes here should be on the white squares. And if you're using the darker colored embroidery thread, then the holes should be on the darker tinted squares. But I forgot about that, and so here all of my holes are the white holes, which really makes this pop a lot more than if I had done it correctly. So I think that it's actually gonna look a little bit better when I do it over the tinted squares. I'll pull up a picture here. This is how it should look. So you can see that the highlighted squares are the green squares in the correct image, and then my version, you know, a little bit going off script. Everything, all these squares here are white. So I think it is gonna look better once I do it in the way it's kind of intended to be, but I still really like it. I think it's super cute and it was a good practice for me. You will notice, however, that it's on a tiny little scrap, and that is because the rest of the fabric, I realized, needs to be washed and dried before I can use it, if I ever want to be able to wash and dry the final apron. So the rest of the fabric is currently in the laundry at the hotel here. Plus, one of you very helpfully in the comments pointed out that actually I should soak my embroidery floss as well in some hot water. So I will be sure to do that. Thank you very much for reminding me, because I absolutely would have forgotten. But yeah, that's where we're at. Very satisfying, very relaxing. For everybody who is saying that they were thinking about trying it, absolutely recommend giving it a go, because it's super fun. Do a little test sample just like I did. You know, it only took me a couple hours to get this done and kind of get a feel for what I was doing and the designs and everything. So definitely give it a try, and as soon as the rest of my fabric comes out of the laundry here, I can get going on the actual apron. Also, since I'm parked here in my lovely red velvet Captain Hook-esque chair, I thought it would be a great time to give a little update on this book that I picked up back in Savannah at that amazing, cute bookstore. If you haven't seen that, it is in this Vlogmas episode right here. But I finished it. I absolutely devoured it in just a couple days. Also, it helps that we had some long transport days, and I am a fast reader, but it's not that thick of a book, so very manageable read. And it was promised to be a dark reimagining of what happened to Captain Hook after Neverland, and it is exactly that. The quote on the cover says, "What Wise does with the Peter Pan mythos is nothing short of astonishing," and I absolutely have to agree. I was a bit skeptical when I picked it up because, if you will remember, I was in a bit of a rush, had to choose a book in a bookstore from a variety of amazing looking books in about 10 minutes, came away with this, and it absolutely did not disappoint. I was quite literally hooked from the very start. I do love the Peter Pan realm and world, and I found that this book takes all of the classic tropes but reworks them within the new framework of the dark twist that's in here for this retelling, and it was stunning. If you're looking for a very cheerful holiday read, this is not the one to do it. It is, like I said, a bit dark. It explores themes of grief and survivor's guilt, but it's also just so magical and so intriguing. There were so many aspects to it that I didn't anticipate. It was so much more than I was expecting, and it was absolutely just so thrilling. I really couldn't put it down. It's super good, flips the entire world of Peter Pan on its head, kind of sets up Peter Pan actually as the villain and manipulating the world around him and everyone else in the world. Wendy, the Lost Boys, and even Captain Hook become his victims, sort of. But then it also ties it into real life. Well, it's not actually, there is still magic in this, but it brings it back to present-ish day London just after the First World War, right before the Second War breaks out. Also, another fun fact that I didn't discover until I had to look something up about the book just now, but the author, Alison Campbell Wise, is in fact a Canadian. So if you out there are Canadian yourself and you would like to support Canadian creators and authors, again, just another strong recommendation for this book right here. And also, probably, most likely, the first one in the series, Wendy Darling, although obviously I can't give a personal recommendation on that one just yet, although you can be sure that I'm gonna have my eyes out for another cute little local bookstore where I can try and purchase the first one in the series.
It's cold outside, but the fire keeps us warm. We can spend the night beneath the mistletoe. It's cold outside, It's cold outside.
When you discover a cafe named after your dog, you're legally obliged to eat pastries, which makes sense because Canal is, after all, basically a croissant. Also, I found it fitting that while there, I got my daily dose of dog petting. fast losing the light from this window here, but that show was absolutely wild and I just had to record it before the amazingness of it slipped my mind. So here's what happened. As y'all know, we had 3 shows yesterday and it was a long day. Today we had only 1 show and everybody was feeling pretty tired, a little bit rough around the edges, kind of beat up and sore. But nonetheless, the first half of the show seemed to go pretty well. Our wheel act, we were, tired, but it actually was a pretty good act and a lot of people were feeling the same way. Then the second half rolled around and what happens is normally there is a little audience warm-up interaction bit that opens the second half of the show, and then Swaypole, our act, is the first real act of the intermission. And so that means that normally once the curtains close on the first half, we start changing into our new costumes and setting up the Swaypole and then warming up. So that had happened. We had just had the 5-minute call, so everyone had 5 minutes before the bell act started, and I was starting to warm up when all of a sudden I heard the sound that nobody wants to hear, which was this lovely rip of my pants opening wide open. And sure enough, I had torn a massive hole in the bum of my pants and there was definitely part of my cheek hanging out. It was a moment. Fortunately, Wardrobe was actually already on stage. She was right next to me when it happened, so I turned to her and I was like, Sequoia, what are we gonna do? Panic. We had literally 5 minutes and then we had the audience interaction bit. So she had to actually cue Ben to go out for their audience interaction moment and then she could come downstairs and help me. It was tight, so I ran down ahead of her, I took off my pants, and I started digging through all of the Lycra scraps that they have on tour, because of course that's all they have is they have Lycra, but that was fine. It was gonna work for a short-term patch. Really just needed absolute emergency repair at this point. So I found some sort of light gray, white, sparkly stuff, and I had it all ready for her when she came downstairs. We cut it to size. I helped her pin it on to the underside of the pants. She sits down to start sewing them, and her machine starts throwing errors. And she's like, I have never seen this error before. I don't know what it means. And it is the most infuriating error because she can sew for about 2 seconds and then it will throw this error and it'll flash on the little screen and it will freeze the whole machine for about 5 seconds. And then it resets and it just lets her start sewing again. So we are sewing, well I should say she is sewing, I'm still trying to warm up. We can hear the audio from on stage so we can tell where we are, and there's like a certain chunk of music that means that like during that music, I know how long it lasts and I need to be on stage at the end of that music. And it's just infuriatingly slow progress. It's like stitch, error. Wait. Stitch, error. Pause. And we're both so frustrated. She's doing the best that she can, but the machine is just, we're both like, oh my God, we hate modern machines. She finally gets it done literally as I'm hearing the end of the music that I'm like, I need to be upstairs on stage now. And we hear a call on the comm, someone's being like, where's Shannon? Is Shannon coming? And Sequoia's like, she throws the pants at me. She doesn't even have time to cut the threads. Like there are threads hanging out all over. I don't care. I'm grateful my butt's not gonna be hanging out. I whip on the pants, throw on the shoes, and like sprint upstage because of course the wardrobe is down a floor. So I'm sprinting up the stairs, running onto the stage. I put on a little bit of chalk because we need chalk on the number. Don't have time to cap it. I yell to somebody, please somebody cap the chalk. I sprint on stage. I think, oh my God, I've made it. And then I realize nobody preset my lantern because I'm supposed to walk out on stage with a lantern. So I have to sprint another probably 20 feet, grab the lantern, run back on stage, and like the second before I hit on stage, I stop to a walk on with my lantern, literally down to the millisecond to my cue. Like I couldn't have been any later without the audience knowing, especially because in this theater, there's not actually an easy way to pass behind. There is a pass through, but it's very small. And if you go really fast, it like waves, the air shakes the whole backstage curtain. It was down to the absolute last second, and The patch was ugly, but we didn't care. This is not judgment on the wardrobe because she did a fantastic job, all things considered. Like, it was so slapdash, and there were threads hanging out. I talked to her, I walked off stage, and she was sitting there watching, and she was like, all I wanted to do was cut all those threads hanging, and I was like, I know, I feel you. Got out there, did it. So if you, for any reason, happen to be watching the one show on the last Sunday of our Detroit one, it was a moment. The show must go on, right? The show just must go on, but without butt cheeks hanging out. The game plan now is I actually have some fabric with me from Phil's pants because I usually travel around with some fabric from both of our pants in case of patches, but for some reason I can't find the fabric from my pants, so we're going to use the fabric from his pants to do a much better looking, longer lasting repair for the next show, and then I think I'm just going to have to keep my eye out for some fabric to make a new pair of pants. I had already planned to make a new pair of pants, I just wanted to do it not on tour, but turns out maybe I'm gonna need to be doing it on tour. So that was what happened. It was a wild ride. The rest of the show went really well. After that, everything was fine, but it was a moment. So anyway, that's it for me for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to tune in next time to see where all the knitting is going. Am I gonna have to sew some pants? I am definitely gonna be searching for some fabric stores. Also, am I gonna be able to find the original book by that author so I can read part 1 now that I've read part 2? It's gonna be fun. So join me for that. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye. I also had time to whip out all my supplies and finally get started on my crazy quilt stocking. So in the end, this is where we're at. This is what it's looking like right now. I am having a super fun time, very happy with the progress. And then a couple of double show days later on in the run gave me some time in between shows to finally work on my knitting some more. Hello and welcome back to episode 8 of this year's Vlogmas. If you're new here and you're not familiar, I am Shannon Makes, fiber artist by day, circus artist by night, and in this little series I'm sort of taking you with me as I travel around the US with a touring Christmas show and filling all of my down moments with a wide variety of crafts. If you'd like to get caught up on all of the previous episodes, they will be linked in all of the usual places, up here, down there, all that good stuff. If you're not new here, then you will be kind of aware that I've settled into a sort of format for these episodes where I mainly highlight one city per episode. But I'm gonna shake it up a little bit for this one because we've entered a phase of our tour where it's become more of a whirlwind, mad dash through all the various cities, basically only spending 1 day per city. So instead of highlighting one city for the whole episode, instead I'm going to sort of cherry pick some fun moments from the past week, whether that is a specific city, something that happened in the show, or the crafting that I got done while on tour. So with that being said, let's pick up right where we left off last episode, and that's going to be with the very last show of our run back in Detroit. Detroit packed up and loaded out, we then headed to Wabash, Indiana, where there wasn't a whole lot happening, but definitely the highlight of that city was watching some of our castmates experience real life snow for the first time. I'm so happy for you.
I've never seen snow. I've never seen snow. Look,
wait to see. That was falling snow. You haven't seen snow on the ground.
Oh my god, we gotta be there for the first snowman.
No, but I was trying to record it and you can't see the snow. Like, it doesn't show it in the video. Like, you can't tell. Look.
Now, if the snow made it start to feel a little bit like Christmas, that feeling was absolutely reinforced the next time we got on the bus to discover that Wendy, our bus driver for the duration of this tour, had completely decked it out in festive lights and trim. next city was also a pretty sleepy town with a very small hotel, which fortunately just meant I had a lot of time left to do some crafting. Not only did I finally get around to washing my fabric for the gingham apron, but I also had time to whip out all my supplies and finally get started on my crazy quilt stocking. Now, if you've seen my first crazy quilt video, the one where I made this bag right here, you'll know that I basically just raided my scrap drawer for leftovers from previous projects. And if you've watched the very first Vlogmas episode, you'll know that for the Christmas colored edition, I'm mainly using thrifted materials like napkins and tablecloths and supplementing them with a couple small packs of purchased fabric. And I did discover that working with fresh, new pieces of fabric made it surprisingly difficult to get started. I felt a little bit bad to cut into the fabric. I couldn't decide on what shape I wanted anything to be. Basically, I actually missed the limitations of working with small scraps of fabric. So in the end, this is where we're at. This is what it's looking like right now. Obviously, it is not fully done, but I am very happy with how it's turned out. So most of the fabric is basted down, except that I will need something here. I'm thinking something kind of like a little bit of a sock. And I'm also thinking that I want to do some sort of big embroidery pattern here, but again, I'm not sure what. I have since grabbed a couple new pieces of fabric at a Goodwill, and I think one of them is gonna go right here, and I might add another one here. Not entirely sure, but I am having a super fun time, very happy with the progress. So first of all, up at the top, we've got this cute little trim that's just a little scrap, and I'm kind of using it to mimic that white fur cuff here. Then we've got the red linen with that fun hemming job there. Basic. This is, as I said before, the sequins from the show, and I did also incorporate some rickrack here. And then this also in the corner here is a little bit of red velvet from the show. Again, got a very fun embroidery pattern that I'm quite happy with. Then back here, remember this was the placemat that had the festive little motif on it, so I cut out just this section so far. And then at the bottom, we've got our chubby little snowman held down with some T-Rex feet. So it's looking quite good. I'm very happy with it. It has been stalled out for a couple days now simply because I want to add in the fabric here, and then I can kind of get back to it, but so far it's looking quite good. It is looking a little bit geometric. Like I said, I was really struggling with not having scraps. I find it much easier to work with the scraps, and now that I don't have the scraps, I'm faced with too many decisions. So I will try and get some more work done on this tomorrow. The hotel here has a very cute little sitting area. I might try and get some work done, and also try to figure out what's gonna go in this big patch here. I would maybe be tempted to put some buttons and beads, but I don't have my buttons and beads with me on tour, so we're gonna see. But this is all I've got done for the moment, but I'm still very happy with the way it's turning out. So for those of you who are also working on some sort of crazy quilted project, I know some of you mentioned you had stockings going. Let me know how they are going. Are you also having a little bit of a tough time with certain parts of your project? Is it going swimmingly? Are you worried you're not going to have it done in time for the 25th? So let me know about that. And in the meantime, let's head on to the next city of the tour. So we rode our Christmas bus to Fort Wayne for a quick show where the highlight might have been Carol Lombard supervising our dressing room. video so you can pedal.
Ow. It's a 2D bicycle in a 3D butt crack.
While nothing particularly eventful happened to us, the artists, the backstage portion of the theater was so small that the crew had a extra long and challenging load-in, which involved the wardrobe cases needing to be lowered into the basement through a trap door. Now, speaking of wardrobe, I got a lot of comments on my previous episode of Vlogmas, the one with the wardrobe malfunction, and they were wondering why I couldn't just go out and buy another pair of leggings for the show instead of trying to sew myself a pair in less than ideal situations. And to those of you who made those suggestions, I do really appreciate that you're trying to be helpful, and I think that's amazing. But I would also recommend that you go check out this video right here. It's the one that I made right before I started the Vlogmas series, my Christmas costuming chaos video, not only because it's just a good video, but also because I do go into a fair amount of detail in that video about circus costumes and the requirements that go into making them, because these are not just costumes for theater where you have to consider things like aesthetics and maybe quick changes, but also you have to consider the tricks that we will be performing in them, and that there's actually a fairly lengthy list of requirements that pretty much all of our costumes have to keep us safe so that we can perform night after night and, you know, not have wardrobe malfunctions, not have the costumes impede the way that we do our tricks. So would recommend starting with that video there. I do talk a tiny bit about the pants, but I also go into how something as simple as just a vest actually has construction restraints and requirements to make sure that we can do our routines safely and soundly every night and still fit with the aesthetic of the show. So in short, to summarize, no, I can't just run to Target and buy a pair of leggings. The pants actually have more requirements for our safety than the vest that I made, and the closest thing that I could buy that would be commercially available would be a pair of jeans that were stretchy but not too stretchy. Like, that's what I use for training, and already that's kind of a little bit tricky to find, but also they're gonna look like a pair of jeans, and they would also even require additional modifications to them. So it would already be a lot of work, and it would still just look like a pair of jeans, which really would not fit with the aesthetic of the show, as I think you can imagine if you've been watching the clips of the show. The next city of note was Green Bay, but unfortunately we were on a really tight timeline for this city, so I had exactly 0 moments of free time to go look around the city, which was a shame, but fortunately we were staying in this gorgeous historic hotel that was absolutely stunning, especially the lobby, so I didn't feel the need to go out and look at anywhere else in the town, and the hotel staff were gracious enough to not mind that I was walking around filming everything. Built in 1924, the hotel is on the State Register of Historic Places, and looking around, it's easy to see why. Away teams playing against the Packers would stay here up through the 70s, and the receptionist told me that the Packers themselves would stay here back when they were known as the Acme Packers. I am absolutely obsessed with these floors, and I took so many photos of them, and then I started thinking that it would probably be possible to replicate this pattern or a very similar version of it in knitting, do some color work to kind of replicate that, and then I was thinking, how cool would it be to have a scarf or something similar inspired by the floor of the lobby of this historic hotel from my tour. One of the coolest features of the lobby, besides the floor, was the old system for storing and sorting the hotel keys back when the keys were actual keys, and I commented on it through the receptionist asking if I could take a couple pictures of it, and she actually let me look at and examine some of the original keys, because they still do apparently have, not all, but a lot of the original keys to the rooms, and we chatted back and forth with some of the history of the building. That's where she told me a lot of the facts that I then just told you, and I have to say overall it was a very refreshing change from the hotel back in West Palm Beach, where I got in trouble for talking about my knitting on camera. The next cities passed in a bit of a blur, although I did have the time to meet up with a few viewers, collected some fabric for my community patchwork project from this video, and then a couple of double show days later on in the run gave me some time in between shows to finally work on my knitting some more. So this is where I'm at in the knitting. I have officially finished the back panel, and I've also basically run out of yarn. So I am done with this project for the moment. I can happily report that my roommate back in Montreal kindly was able to run to the same yarn store and get more of this yarn. So I have a bunch of skeins of it waiting for me back in Montreal so that I can then tackle the front and the sleeves and get this all sewn up. But for the moment, I'm super happy with how it turned out. As you can see, I still have, this is how much I have left of the second skein of that color. But yeah, so here it is. First of all, look at how stretchy it is. If I go to the bottom. Ooh. I do know that I had a lot of comments on various episodes of this telling me, oh, but you needed to make a swatch. You should have made a swatch. And first of all, I kind of went over why I chose this project to begin with, this particular pattern, and it was because I did not need to do a swatch, because I knew that if I made it up with the correct yarn on the correct size needles, it would be the correct size. And while some of you did comment that, you know, different people knit with different tensions, and that is very true, my gauge is probably not going to be exactly the same as the pattern designer's gauge, but this pattern, another reason I chose it is because it's very flexible. This one size pattern, this exact thing with no modifications, is meant to fit busts from 32 to 42 inches, I think, something like that. It's about a 10-inch range because look at how stretchy that is. So that's why I chose it. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and yeah, I'm really loving the two colors together. It's looking pretty good, although I do think that blocking it out is going to make it look even better, just kind of help even all the tension out. So I am looking forward to getting back to Montreal and, oh, we're losing the sun. Time out. But yeah, I am looking forward to getting back to Montreal and blocking this out to see how much that kind of helps to even all the tension out. Yeah, happy with the color combinations, happy with the pattern, very happy with how the cables turned out. Maybe if we turn it to the good side, yeah, there we go. So that's a very fun pattern. Those of you who have been asking me about this pattern and how to get it, you have to message the pattern maker on Instagram. She doesn't have a website, so this is her handle again. You can message her and ask for the Aurora pattern. It's this pattern right here. It was very affordable. I enjoyed it, and I think it's a very fun knit if you're looking for something that's kind of simple and repetitive. So if you're the kind of person who gets really bored by a repetitive pattern, this one might not be the one for you, but for me it was absolutely perfect because I'm looking for something that I can do while I'm tired, while I'm on the bus, while I'm watching, you know, an episode of TV in the bed of the hotel at night, and I don't have to focus too much on what the pattern is. So because it's a simple ribbed knit, it's just like knit 3 purl 4 or knit 4 purl 3 with very few exceptions, like the cable section at the bottom, which does admittedly require a little bit more focus. It's really great for not taxing your brain too much. And I do generally like to have a couple knitting projects going at a time when I'm not filming them for YouTube, because it's always harder to have multiple projects and multiple footages bouncing around, it's much harder to get the video together. But when I'm just knitting for myself, I do like to have a couple projects going, and like one that's a little bit more simple that I can do when I want to watch something in the background, and one that's a little bit harder where I kind of need to focus on it and like do a pattern. So this is a really great candidate for that simpler option, or if you're a beginning knitter, especially if you're wanting to get into vintage knits where the instructions are known to be a little bit questionable and to assume that you have a lot of prior knowledge about knitting. This one is gives you a vintage result, but it's written with modern instructions. So the instructions are a bit more thorough. They assume that you have less knowledge of knitting and they kind of hold your hand a little bit more through the whole pattern. So that's where we're at, and I am really happy about it and excited to move on to the next project, which is probably going to be a little bit more complicated. It's probably going to be this one right here, which I'm going to do up with some Cascades Japanese maple colored wool because I have a bunch of that. Again, there is a monthly vlog for my Patreons where I talk about this yarn and how I got it for a steal. So that's probably what I'll be doing up next on my needles. Either that, or I found a really cute little vintage headband style pattern that I'll throw right there. Might do that one up. Can probably do it with some of the Cascades yarn I have in my luggage right here. So we'll see how much time I have at the end of the tour, and maybe I'll get to that after Christmas, after I've finished my stockings and all the other sewing. So if that felt like a little bit of a whirlwind episode to you, trust me, it felt the same to me as I was living it, but I tried my best to kind of put it together into a cohesive storyline for you, and I hope that you really enjoyed it. Fortunately, I think in the next couple episodes will be a little bit more stable because we spent a bit more time in Dayton. We'll be spending some more time in Michigan, so we'll be a little bit more stable. Hopefully can return to something more resembling the previous episodes. And yes, that was it. I was also looking at the calendar, and there is supposed to be an episode that comes out on Christmas Day, but I'm not actually sure if I'm going to put out an episode then because people will be very busy. Christmas is notoriously a busy day for everybody, so I don't think I'll put out a full episode, but I might put out a very short little episode because there is kind of a funny Christmas gift exchange story that has already halfway set itself up, and the conclusion will be revealed on Christmas Day when I give the gift. So maybe I can tell you all that just do a fun short little holiday gift exchange story for you that's going to make everyone giggle because it's very funny and very heartwarming. And then perhaps, you know, do a wrap-up episode after Christmas so you can see where everything finished. Hopefully I can get more than just the sweater finished. So that's it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Bye! I'm happy to report that I got a lot of work done. I now have 4 crazy quilted stockings. That was an interesting limitation that I found myself chafing against a little bit. I do foresee a potential issue. Hello friends, and welcome back to the final and very late Vlogmas wrap-up episode for this year. As many of you have noted in the comment section across my channel this past month, it is quite late, and that's simply due to a combination of factors, which I'll get into a little bit later. But now I'm here and ready to go, so let's pick back up with where we left off in the last episode, and that was Dayton, Ohio, in the cutest little bookshop that was a literal stone's throw from our theater, and where I continued my quest for the sequel to Hooked. This was a very fun bookstore and gift shop run by volunteers with the Dayton Book Fair, a nonprofit organization that collects books year-round, and the proceeds from the store benefit local nonprofits. The books are all $1, which means that the majority of the proceeds come from the sale of their gifts, many of which are handmade by local artists, and the selection is humorous, whimsical, and eclectic. Highlights for me included their wide selection of pins and their amazing teapot collection. gifts were just fun gifts. Goofy pins or cute cards, earrings, chocolate bars, but many of my favorites were literary themed, like the Jane Austen series or the mugs covered in names of banned books. It was so much fun to browse through everything the shop had to offer and chat with the volunteers running the store, and I ended up visiting it all 3 days we were in Dayton. So the real question is, was I successful in finding the sequel to Hooked? And the answer is unfortunately not. I finished the entire tour without getting my hands on a copy, but I have to say I'm not incredibly surprised because all I could find from here on out was used bookstores, and so obviously they don't carry a consistent stock, and I still had a ton of fun browsing around, poking through all these fun little bookstores, and this one especially had an amazing selection of little like gifts and knickknacks, which I completely took advantage of for getting some small little Christmas gifts for my friends and family, and also for our secret snowflake gift exchange. So the first thing, and I'll just run through them really quickly here, this is a fun little mug that I got for Phil because the very first day he accompanied me to the bookstore to look around, and he saw this sitting there with its little bugs, and he said that he thought it was really cute and fun. So I ended up getting that for him. I got a couple pairs of socks for friends and family. They were only $4 each for these really cute cotton socks, so they were perfect little stocking stuffers and very festive also. Loving the color schemes. And then I only have one on hand because I gave all the other ones away, but there was an amazing selection of pins. This one is my all-time favorite, which I'm keeping, and it says "Be the person that your dog thinks you are." So very fun. I will be attaching this onto a book bag or something like that. Also got this fun little tarot card which says "The Dog Mom." Again, very on brand for me. Even their packaging was super adorable. So it all has, you know, Rabbit Hole Books Dayton on it. Branding, absolutely on point, very whimsical, very fun. When I bought the stuff, they asked me if I wanted to wrap it. They had like a wrapping station where you could wrap things for free. I don't know. It was a super fun experience. I really enjoyed it. If you're ever in the Dayton area, definitely check out Rabbit Hole Bookstore. Even though I didn't find the book I was looking for, I did walk away with 2 other books, one of which is Shady Characters, very fun about the history and origin of various unusual punctuation marks and other characters in, you know, writing. And then I also got one of the books in the Redwall series. I know they're 2 completely different ends of the spectrum, but I figured they would balance each other out very well, and I do love the Redwall series, used to read it as a kid, so I kind of have been bouncing back and forth. I am most of the way through the Shady Characters and really enjoying it so far. And then lastly, I did also meet up with one of my patrons who handed me a lovely bunch of fabric to add to my community scraps project, which I'll just add to my collection of other fabric that people have given me throughout the tour. It was super fun to meet up with all of you. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much to everyone who came out, and also to those of you who wanted to come out but couldn't because your holiday plans got interrupted by COVID. I am so sorry. Trust me, I feel your pain, and maybe next time. So thank you so much, everyone. Let's head over to Lansing, Michigan. Hello friends, I'm coming to you this morning from East Lansing, Michigan, where I have the entire day off until the show tonight, which is a lovely feeling. We are finally slowing down a tiny bit. So I have some fun plans because I need to find some googly eyes. I have a prank in mind that involves the use of googly eyes. This is something that I enjoy doing on contract. I love to play fun, innocent little pranks on my castmates, and for this one, we're gonna need some googly eyes. So it is a lovely day outside, albeit a bit brisk, so gonna dress up nice and warm and go explore the city, hopefully find some really fun shops, and cross our fingers, some prank material. And then when we come back, maybe a little bit later before the show, if there's time, also get some work done on the crazy quilt stocking. So let's get all bundled up and go explore East Lansing. Right away we found a Target, but it was small and the art section was tiny, so no googly eyes there, and we decided to continue our quest elsewhere. Along the way we found a really cute secondhand bookstore, and you know I had to stop in there trying to find Wendy Darling. Unfortunately, it had neither the book I was looking for nor a resident cat, but I was very amused by the selection of highly specific genre subcategories. We were also on the lookout for some gifts for our show's Secret Snowman gift exchange, so a funky and eclectic novelty store caught my eye. I'm an absolute sucker for botanical prints, cute woodland animals, or anything with mushrooms on it, so this store was an absolute delight. Then it was just a short walk through campus back to the hotel. Okay, well, it wasn't fully a success on the googly eye front. We did not find any, unfortunately, so I'll have to keep my eyes peeled for future stores down the road in which to complete my quest. So stay tuned for the riveting saga of will Shannon find googly eyes and what is the prank she's planning on doing with them. But I did not come away empty-handed because I did find some very cute artwork. First of all, I really enjoyed my time out in the city. It's a lovely city. It's so nice to be out in some crisp winter weather. I was melting in Florida, so I was thrilled about the cold weather, and we were on campus. That was very cute. It is very much a university town, but there were some really super cute shops along the way, and one of them I got some very fun artwork because the hotel that we're in has this absolutely amazing gallery wall in the first and second floor, like along this staircase, and I was super inspired by it. First of all, let me just say that this hotel has been so interesting and unique. We've really been staying in hotels that run the whole gamut in terms of aesthetic, the last time they were updated, the features they have, and this hotel is checking all of my boxes. It is so whimsical, just absolutely really enjoying the stay here, and that gallery wall totally inspired me. So I got some artwork so that I can start my own gallery wall. Now, these are not meant to be artwork. They are in fact letters to send to somebody, but I'm not sending them to anybody. I'm sending them to myself because I love them. So the first one is by the artist of the name Paul Bond, who specializes in magical realism, and like, obviously, look at this. Very whimsical, very beautiful. I love the image in and of itself, just like minus the touch of magical realism up here, which I thought was just super, super cute, and I really just love the way that he is playing with it. I love magical realism as a genre in literature, in art apparently as well, so that was a fun one. This is very much a standalone piece. I only got one by him. And then I got 4 by the next artist, who is Deidre Wicks. She is inspired by her love of animals, fashion, costume, old photographs, and tea. So is it any wonder that her artwork spoke to me? And just wait until you see the artwork that I got. And I know that there's at least a couple of you out there that are gonna squee at this because it is a series of watercolor squirrels. I love the squirrels. I know some of you love the squirrels, and who doesn't love a little anthropomorphic squirrels? Dressing them up, here's like the hipster squirrel. This is actually called Sail Rack Sweater. Very cute. And then Black Magic Coffee. So I thought that these were just super cute. They all go together. There's 4 of them. You know, it's a whole theme. can make a whole little gallery wall of them just to remind me of this tour and the time here. And yeah, I'm gonna pause this segment for a brief little knitting interruption, because if you've made it this far in the video, you've probably also watched the earlier episodes. And I think it was episode 7 where I talk about finding this sweater that I'm wearing here, how I found it at a thrift store, and I also said this. If anybody knows what the name of this particular knit pattern is, please let me know in the comments, because I really dig it and I would love to try to use it myself at some point. Well, I have to say, so many of you jumped on the cause and dug around in knitting books, finding similar stitches and patterns, but there were a couple of you that absolutely took it to the next level. I had someone DM me asking for detailed photos of the sweater, and then they worked with a friend to painstakingly recreate the exact pattern, which I'm very happy to report I've been given permission to share with everybody out there watching this who would like to do it for themselves. So here are some images from that viewer of the process of figuring out that stitch. Here it is all worked up, and the instructions on how to knit this basic stitch pattern is up on my Ko-fi account for free, and it's over there just because that was the easiest, most consistent place for me to put a permanent free link to the PDF for download. So please help yourself to it, use it, make amazing things for it, but don't pay me for it. Instead, if you have money that you would like to throw at a small creator, go support the woman who actually helped create the pattern. She's making a reversible hat and cowl pattern using this stitch that she'll have for sale, and rumor is that she's calling it My Circus, My Monkeys, in honor of, well, this whole situation. Present day Shannon popping in to say that this pattern is now live. It is done. She finished it. She sent it to me, and I talked about it a little bit on my main channel when she had finished it, but I wanted to say that now it is up, it is live, it is good. So if you would like to go purchase it, I will put all the links and information for that down in the video description. It looks like a very enjoyable pattern. Be sure to go give her some love, and a massive, massive thank you to both of these lovely viewers for working together to make what was sort of an offhand, vague suggestion become an actual reality. Okay, back to Lansing. So that's where I'm at right now. It is almost 3 o'clock, so I think I'm going to grab lunch, make myself a little tea, get all of my fabric supplies, and go get some work done on my stocking and the crazy quilting. But I'm not sure if I'm actually going to be able to film any of it for you, because word on the elevator is that some of our cast has gotten a jump start on the Christmas present for the cast, which is our stage manager went out and bought a Oculus Quest so that we can play Beat Saber on the VR for our Christmas party. But apparently some of the cast is pre-gaming in a very non-alcoholic sense. They're testing out the Beat Saber right now as we speak, and in the very same spot that I was planning on going to sew. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna film any of this for you, but I'll at least check in after the fact. So I'll catch up with you in the next scene. Well, obviously I did not film any of the actual crazy quilting that day or any of the following days, but I'm happy to report that I got a lot of work done. I now have 4 crazy quilted stockings that are well on the way to being done, although as you will notice, they are not 100% done. First of all, because none of them, they're not sewn together. My camera battery died, but if we go back to the main point, you can see they're not sewn together yet, and that is because they're not entirely done. Like, I do think there's more work that can be done on them, but I also was like, you know what, I'm not gonna rush it. The whole point of Vlogmas was that I didn't have to finish projects perfectly in order to put out a video, which, let me tell you, was very relieving and enjoyable. So what I did was I got a good amount of work done on 4 individual separate pieces, and I will continue work on them, probably pull them out next holiday season and continue to work on them then at leisure, and then I'll sew them together at some point. Some observations I did have. One, it was very tricky for me to only use Christmas colors. So I've got red, green, some white, silver, and then I did end up adding in a little bit of like light tan and brown, which did kind of go well with the gingerbread men. That is also the only colors that I had on hand, but I felt like it was what I wanted to put on a Christmas stocking. I wanted Christmas colors on a Christmas stocking. So that was an interesting limitation that I found myself chafing against a little bit. They look fine in the end. I'm not unhappy with how they turned out. It just like made me be more creative with my stitches. Although the other thing I wanted to say is that in the end, I did not actually try that many more new stitches, because a lot of the time I was just like doing it on the bus or in a moment where I wanted to relax and not necessarily have the brain power to come up with new stitches. So I would just glance at my bag, my patchwork bag that I made, and copy those stitches again, which I'm completely happy with. I have no problem with it. I just thought it was funny. I'll show you some of the new stitches that I did or made up here, and I think they look quite nice. The other thing that I noticed is that I did not add nearly as many sequins into the embroidery as I was originally anticipating, but that was actually because our costumer gave me a bunch more scraps, and a lot of them were sequined scraps, or like this one here where it has some glitter in the fabric itself. You can tell that it's a spandex because it's like bubbling a little bit and not sitting perfectly flat, but that's fine. It just ended up being a bit too much sparkles between the sequins and then the sparkles, and then like if I would try to add in more sequins like I did here but like on stitches that already had sequins, it just felt like a little bit too much. I love Christmas, but I'm not necessarily a Christmas maximalist or a maximalist in any facet of my life. So I think I struck a nice balance. I was really enjoying working the rickrack in with the embroidery. That was something I did not really do on the bag. So I have to say I'm really satisfied with how a lot of these rickrack patterns turned out. I'll give you some close-ups here. And also you'll notice that I did cut up my sampler from the chicken scratch apron, and it is spread out in a couple different places on here. And so that was very fun to be able to add that in. So all in all, 10 out of 10 would recommend. Found it very relaxing. Did not branch out as much as I would have liked, but I am totally fine with that, and I absolutely will be very excited to pick these back up next Christmas. I'll come back to it with renewed enthusiasm next year. Let me know how you enjoyed them. Do you find them too much? Are they too much Christmas for you? Do you think I struck a nice balance? Were you inspired to try any crazy quilting yourself this holiday season, or even coming up this year? I would absolutely recommend it. I think there are just so many things that could be done with this, and I find it so relaxing. So let me know your thoughts on the whole crazy quilt situation. Now, to follow up on the riveting saga of the googly eyes, because we are now rapidly approaching the final city of the tour, I did end up finding some at Walmart. It was this big pack with a variety of sizes, which was absolutely perfect for what I wanted to do with it. So on the very last day of the contract, I snuck into a couple people's dressing rooms and just had some fun. I do wish I could have done even more with these, but actually I very nearly got caught in the act as it was, so this was all I managed to film, although I will say that later on that same day, I did put several other pairs of eyes on various costumes and props, and where it wouldn't endanger the performer, some pieces of equipment. And now seems like a good time also to elaborate on part of the reason why I didn't get this vlog out sooner, because it's also part of the reason that I had to wait till the very last day to apply these googly eyes. And it was because of a couple things. One of them was our last city where I had planned on filming a lot of the vlog. Well, not only were we all in these absolutely tiny hotel rooms with no natural light whatsoever, but more importantly, there was a wave of COVID that hit the cast and the crew, and that just shook everything up. It canceled a lot of our holiday plans, and it also added a unhealthy dose of tension into the cast on our last week with the tour. So I kind of just ruined any holiday spirit that I or everyone else in the cast was feeling. So I decided that rather than trying to film something then and sort of force it and not feel good about it, I decided to wait until I had better lighting and was in a better mood. So if you see people in masks in some of the later clips in this video, that's why we were all masking backstage to try and keep everyone healthy. I didn't get COVID. I was able to perform the entire run of shows, but it was still just not quite the ending to the tour that everyone was hoping for. On a more cheerful note, if I remember correctly, I had alluded to a little Christmas time gift exchange situation that might be happening, and now I think it's a good time to expand on this story. And I started filming this story earlier, but then I was rather abruptly cut off by housekeeping. So at some point you might notice the audio changes, and I'll just be finishing the story up back here for you. So the first half of the story takes place all the way back in Savannah, where, if you'll recall, we visited this very cute riverside market, and one of the things that I got there, which I didn't show on camera because I didn't think anything of it, was I got a Christmas present for one of our cast members. Now, we've been spending a lot of time on tour with this other couple called Edgar and Gisela. They're from Spain. They're lovely. They're the aerialists, one of the aerialists in our show, and we've noticed that Edgar always has these super fun socks, which I really approve of. I also always have fun socks. And so when we were out and I saw this stand with this amazing selection of really fun socks, I was like, you know what? It could be kind of fun. These are just screaming Edgar. Let's see if we can find a pair that we can give him for Christmas. So as soon as I saw this pair, I was like, this is perfect. I've got to get this for him. And so the socks, they're Christmas donuts, but if you look here, you can see on the bottom that they have a really fun message. And you know, being a circus artist, our feet are very often off the ground, so people can read this all the time. I thought this was the perfect gift for Edgar, so we bought it and we went on our way. Fast forward to Charleston the very next day, and we're out with Edgar and Gisela visiting the city, and we go into this shop, which I didn't show on the vlog, but I have some shots of it here, and it was an ugly Christmas store. And we were having fun looking around when all of a sudden Phil came up to me, and he had this kind of funny look on his face, and he asked me, so what exactly did those socks look like that we got for Edgar? And I was like, well, you know, they were black and they had these Christmas colored donuts on them, and they had this like fun message on the bottom. And he was like, okay, we have a problem. We have a situation, because Edgar is over there looking at the display of socks, and he literally has chosen the exact same pair of socks and he's about to purchase them. Now, fortunately, I had actually already mentioned to his wife Gisela that we had gotten him a pair of socks for Christmas. She already knew about them. So really quickly, I got Phil to like pull Gisela aside, and I was like, you can't let him buy those socks. Those are the exact pair of socks that we just got him yesterday. So she was like, okay. So she walked back over to the stand, and her and Phil were like, oh, but like, what about these socks? These are really fun socks too. And he was like, yeah, no, I like them, but I really like these socks. And he was very reluctant to let go of the donut socks. And so finally at some point, Gisela had to be like, Edgar, you can't buy these socks. And he was like, what? He was so confused. And she was like, no, just trust me on this one. Put that pair of socks down and get another pair of socks, please. You'll understand later. And he was like, okay, super confused. Ended up with another pair of very fun, like goofy Santa socks, left the store, and then probably forgot about the episode a couple days later until the very last day of the tour, when we presented our pair of socks to Edgar and told him the story of what had happened.
Now I understand everything.
Everybody,
Like 2-3 days before.
No.
This
Yeah,
exact
yes,
pair. So when
the
you start to
same
look at
pair.
them, it's oh yeah, these are together. We're like, look, those Santa ones are nice too.
Oh my God.
Right?
Needless to say, he really enjoyed them, and now he has a funny story to go with them too. So next up, I had filmed one last vintage pattern of the day for you that never got aired. So we're gonna jump right over to that because there's some very fun and funky patterns. And then we're gonna come back for a little bit more knitting because I've actually got a question for all the more experienced knitters out there. So I've got two vintage patterns for everyone today. They both came from a basement church vintage sale in Montreal that my roommate suggested we go to, and I was so glad that she did because we had a really great time. Canel had a blast. It was a good time all around, and I came away with a couple really fun vintage patterns and from years that are definitely outside my wheelhouse, but super fun nonetheless. So this first one, it is from 1971. It cost me $4, and it is this very fun McCall's pattern, which, if we're being honest, I don't really need a pattern to make these skirts. They're pretty simple skirts. If we look at the pattern pieces back here, they're mostly just rectangles. But I was just intrigued by the art, honestly. I really enjoy the art on these patterns and the styling. And, you know, if nothing else, it's just inspiration for colors and patterns. I definitely enjoy the ruffle at the bottom and this cute little corselet thing we've got going on here. So very fun. Also very reminiscent of the gunny sacks style that was super popular, which I have replicated, aped in a very strange way in my Gunny Saxowine Cuban Pete from the Mask mashup. Another fully recycled project that was super goofy. Now, like all of the previous patterns in the series, I have not actually opened this one up because it came in this envelope here and it was basically just purchase without examining the pattern. Again, it feels fairly hefty, so it looks like we've got a good wad of paper here, which is always a good sign, and it looks like it's either factory folded or somebody did a really good job of jamming these back in here. So opening up the instructions, they don't have a copy of the pattern art on here, but the pattern instructions do look fairly detailed. Interestingly enough, the instructions on here do not seem to be quite as comprehensive as some of the other ones we've looked at. So by 1971, apparently McCall's at least is getting rid of some of their detailed instructions, but they do go ahead and tell you to do things such as straightening the ends of your fabric, cutting it so it's nice and square, and also making sure that your grain is square. So they give you instructions to straighten the grain, which is kind of fun, and I've actually never seen that on instructions before. And then they also do include a list of sewing terms here, which is kind of fun and fairly comprehensive. It runs the whole length of the pattern instructions. They do have some very cute little drawings on the back side here, like that one. Very cute, very detailed, but all in all, I would say not quite as detailed as some of the other patterns we've looked at. It is a skirt, so admittedly skirts are much easier to sew than some of the other garments in the series. So there's that. Let's take a look at the pattern pieces. So upon closer examination, these pattern pieces have been used. They have been cut out. I can tell that the notches, they have been used, but somebody has taken great care to fold them back up, which again gives me a lot of hope that all of the pieces are here, and also because again it is a very hefty wad here, and then we've got a wad over here, a little bit thinner, but still it looks like these are actually uncut. So these are the ones that did not get used. These are the ones that did get used. And again, because it's a skirt, if there's something missing, should be fairly simple to just make it up. So feeling quite happy about that one, and just completely loving the color scheme. It would be kind of fun to try and replicate one of these outfits in its entirety, color scheme and all. So yeah, there you go, McCall's 2720 from 1971. The trick, of course, now is going to be getting these all back in the envelopes in as good a shape as I found them. Another thing I'm really enjoying is when they come with the stamp of the store that they were originally sold at. So this one has a stamp with the name of the store and the city that it came from. So that's kind of fun. And I do occasionally see these, especially in Canada. I don't know if this is as much of a thing in the US, but I think there's one over on this one too? No, there's not one on this one, but some of the other ones that I found at thrift stores have these stamps on them, and it's always kind of fun to see their provenance. There's pattern number 1, and pattern number 2 is a simplicity pattern from 1977, also costing me $4. And this one is this super fun like caftan top thing we've got going on here. I bought it because I particularly love this view right here with the sort of V waistline, and I think I might actually try to combine this bottom edge here with the V neck and the little diamond in the middle from this one. So we're going to be combining a couple views here, which is going to be super fun. Size 14, which I haven't even looked if this is my size. Size 14 corresponds to a bust 36, so that's gonna be right on par for me. A tiny bit big, but not too bad. So definitely looking forward to this one because I think it's gonna be a super comfortable one. I'm actually really looking forward to making this, which means that let's hope that they're actually in here because I haven't opened these yet. Pulling out again a wad of papers, which looks quite promising. Although they do look like they're cut out already, so let's see. They're definitely not factory folded. They have been used and wedged back in here is my belief. Yep, definitely already used because somebody has cut them out and cut off the second half of the little triangle that's supposed to be on there. So they have already been used, but there is a hefty wad of them. So I am hoping that all of the pieces are in here. And again, if they're not, I feel pretty confident in my ability to just make it up. But, oh, we've got, that's fun. 2 patterns, one in French, one in English. We'll go with the English one for your benefit. So again, cutting and sewing directions. They've got some cutting layouts here on the bottom. They do give you some basic instructions on how to use your simplicity pattern. Read first, then sew. I mean, honestly, whoever actually does, but they tell you to prepare your pattern, doing things such as pressing the pattern pieces, not trimming away the margins. They tell you how to lengthen and shorten it, and then they explain what the pattern markings mean, the arrows for the grain, the fold line, all the notches and stuff. And then they also tell you a little bit about the fabric, the cutting layout, the suggested cutting layouts that they have down here, and then they tell you step 4 is mark and sew, and they suggest marking with a tracing wheel and dressmaker's tracing paper, chalk, or tailor's tacks. So we're still in the era in 1977 when that's pretty common practice to use chalk or tailor's tacks, which is kind of fun. Did not know that. Then they have all of the cutting instructions on the page 2 here with some nice color coordination so that you can tell what's the right side and what's the wrong side. And again, this looks like a very fun pattern. Should be a fairly simple sew and a very comfortable end result. So of all the patterns that I have in this series, this is definitely one of the ones that I am really looking forward to actually making up because I think it's going to get a lot of use in my wardrobe. So that'll do it for this vintage pattern of the day. Which of the 2 was your favorite? Would you be making up the skirt or would you be making up the caftan? Or both? I don't know. They're both very cute patterns. Really digging it. Loving the options for mixing and matching the styles in this one over here. So that was the end of the tour for me, and while January marks a general winding down of things for many people, it's actually when stuff really started ramping up for me personally, because we were invited to go to Budapest for a prestigious international circus festival where we got to compete alongside some of the best acts in the world. And there are plenty more details in my monthly Patreon vlog, but I will say that it was an absolute whirlwind. I did get lots of knitting done, so the next video up on the channel might have to be making those knitting bags that I teased maybe a couple months ago, because this is what I've been carrying my knitting around in for the past 3 weeks. That might be my last strictly crafting video for a little while though, because I have an absolutely massive project that I'm about to embark on. I'm so excited to introduce it to you, but there will definitely be a few changes around here, and I think that's all I'm gonna say on that. If you're a patron, you already know, but the rest of you are just gonna have to hold on to your socks because it is gonna be a wild ride, and I hope you all love it. But for now, sticking on topic, all you knitters out there, please, can you help me out with something? Because, as you know, I've got this sweater here that I was working on for much of my Vlogmas, and I've got the rest of the yarn waiting for me back in Montreal so that I can finish it, but I do foresee a potential issue. So what I'm wondering about is color bleed, because as you can see, these are two very, very different colors. We've got the dark blue over here, we've got the light tannish gray on top, and I did notice that when I was blocking out my swatch, which was in the dark blue, I rolled it to dry, as you saw in the video, on a white towel, and I did notice, much to my chagrin for the hotel itself, that the blue did bleed a fair amount, and I think this is not unusual. Like, I know that yarn does bleed, but my question is, how do I wash this so that the blue doesn't bleed onto the white? Because I do potentially see that being an issue. Like, is that a thing? Can the blue bleed into the white? And if so, is there a way that I can prevent that from happening? I've been trying to brainstorm, like, is it possible to soak just the blue half and, you know, not wring it out, but, you know, stamp it out a couple times until the water runs clear, and then I can soak and block the whole thing? I don't know. I'm not sure what to do. I thought I would ask because I know that there are much more experienced knitters than me out there. So I have all this stuff to block it. I'm just hesitant to do so until I figure out if there's gonna be substantial color bleed. Or is it just something I can't avoid? Do I have to accept that there's going to be some color bleed? And if so, c'est la vie. Just let me know about that. Cannot wait to hear the answers in the comments. So then, with that question hopefully soon to be solved, we have one last thing, and that is that I have an absolute mountain of letters and packages from everyone who donated fabric scraps to my community patchwork project, and I just wanted to say thank you all so much. Some of you have asked for an unboxing video, and I'm not sure if that's gonna happen because I feel like it's gonna take minimum 2 hours to open all of this, and I don't think there's that many of you who would really sit through that long of a video, but I did at least want to say that I am super grateful. The concept was a massive success, which I was definitely worried about, and now I just need to brainstorm what I'm gonna make with all of it. Obviously, some sort of patchwork something, but what? It'll probably have to be a few different things just based on the quantity of scraps that I've gotten. So if you've got any brilliant ideas on what to do with them, let me know. And just know that even if I don't choose exactly your idea, you'd be really surprised how much just the vague suggestion of something can really spark an idea and jumpstart the brainstorming process. So throw all of those comments down below for me to marinate on. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this last montage, and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye!
Oh, I'm so happy to see you, Canal. Hey, mama. Oh.